Okay, the Planning Commission meeting for March 24th, 2014 is called to order. First order of business is the presentation of the review of the proposed sign code, PC 14-029.
And this is a work session, I understand.
Work session.
Yes. Is there a chance Mr. Espy is going to be here?
We were just talking about that. I think we got an email from him, but
Okay,
I was
'cause
trying to find
he
it.
has. I know he has a lot of
Concerns.
opinions.
I think he emailed me that he can't make it, but pregnancy brain, I was kind of getting confused.
That's all right.
But I'm pretty sure
He may
did.
have a conflict tonight with his Lake Oswego stuff.
I think it was. I'm trying to find it.
Well, thank you. Last time I saw you was about a month ago, and we talked about our sign code update process. As you know, it was one of the City Commission goals to look at our signage standards and see if they're appropriate or if they need to be changed in any way. There hadn't been any significant look at them in over 20 years. So we talked about the public process involved with updating the sign code last time. And this time, the purpose of this meeting is to go through the details of the proposed code. Here's a summary of what our existing code is. Sort of a fun picture.
I think this was on our work session, our list of top 20s
I think the one
from
on the
2 years, from a year and a half ago. We had a work session about what we wanted to get accomplished.
I think the one on the
Well, we
right
could
is
cross
really
that off then.
spectacular.
So,
Not yet.
Not yet. So, the sign code is very, very detailed, and it's very detailed because there's not a lot of discretion, or there shouldn't really be any discretion in our sign code. And so that means to you that we're going through each of those little details tonight. The purpose of this work session is to convey staff's latest recommendation of sign code and to get any feedback if there's anything you want us to look into further or any problems that you foresee. I'll be talking a lot, but a two-way dialogue is always good. If you see any red flags, let us know now so we can fix it. We know it's a work in progress.
I think the main thing too is that it's difficult opening up a sign code and trying to rewrite it. And so just some of the ground rules that we kind of talked about, and Laura will go through some of the legal requirements in terms of being content neutral. And we struggled with that a little bit with our working group, our technical advisory team. Reminding them that we'll just make real estate signs legal on the weekend. Well, we can't look at content, and so just keep that in the back of your mind when we're having this discussion, because it is tricky. And I think that there's some things we've identified where we weren't able to gain consensus, and so. I guess I just want to be thoughtful and go through this until you're comfortable with it. I mean, we have a hearing schedule set out, but like I said, we're opening this up for the first time in a long time, and so I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable before we move it forward. So that being said, if we need to come back and I'd like to try and dwindle the list every time we meet, but we really are looking, to kind of go through this very carefully with you.
I had a question that kind of goes back to some of our previous discussions.
Mm-hmm.
We already have a sign code.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being enforced. So I guess the question I have is, in light of that, is there an intent? Is there a mechanism that we're going to, once this sign code is in effect, put an enforcement mechanism in process?
So tonight we're talking about what the proposed code is, but we've heard as a number one issue from pretty much everybody in the community that we've talked to. We've already had 19 meetings, and our community advisory team, it seems that there's a consensus that enforcement is one of the more important parts about the sign code, especially since our current sign code is not currently being enforced unless there's dangerous situations. So,
And there was a conscious decision by the city manager to not do that unless it was pretty flagrant or
Most of the sign complaints that we get are signs stuck in the right of way. I mean, that's a lot of the complaints that we get.
So in a planting strip or
Right, or stuck on a telephone
median.
pole, or, you know.
Well, that's easy. You just go take them.
Right,
Because
so.
there's
right.
so many illegal signs, I think people think that a lot of the illegal signs are okay. So if we could work on the education component, there might be more enforcement. So we're putting together a proposal, and it will include things like enforcement. We'll talk about it later, but murals are a part of this code, and they would go for approval by an arts commission. And so we'll talk about that in this general memo. So it's everything not related to the specific sign code. That's going to come back to you in a month on April 14th. And we'll put together a recommendation for the city commission to look at ways to figure out how we can have sustainable enforcement for our sign code. So different methodologies, how we can work to do education, or if we do need more staff time donated to this, they're the only ones that can control that budget and allocate funding.
Well, I think one of the
So-
things that I know I agree with Charles, but I think one of the things that I would like to see in our community is that we have sign code compliance as opposed to enforcement. Now, I know that we had a situation during the last political situation, the last political round, where somebody had taken a sign, and the one over at the Sportscraft Landing, they had just taken their campaign sign and put it up on that sign, and that was on, that was City of Oregon City's property, and I know that that was not legal. And then there was the issue, maybe it's in here, but I didn't see it, but people who, there's a certain truck that would go around town, and he would let people put their campaign signs on it, and then it would be sitting somewhere, and then, maybe 2 weeks later they'd move it. So, I mean, it was one of those things where, and the first time it was located, it was someplace where it was a site obstruction. So, I mean, that was dangerous. I mean, it had nothing to do with the political thing, but it was just that this thing was getting used as a sign. And they kept saying it was temporary, but it was gigantic. So it didn't meet any of our code requirements, and it had to go away. So it went away. I mean, it was, code enforcement took care of it.
Yeah, so the community advisory team that we put together, again, it was 7 individuals who represented a variety of interests. One of their concerns was signs on vehicles, or vehicles acting as signage, and we researched that quite a bit, and you will not see it in our sign code. It's not in our current sign code, but it's also not in this draft sign code. We ran into a lot of barriers with DMV law and all sorts of
The who?
DMV regulations and all sorts of legal issues regarding signage on cars, and we're being content neutral. How are we distinguishing the Ford sign versus a sign that says "Here's my business" or whatever?
I know somebody that went around, put a sign on top of their car, but then in the evening he drove around town with it. He didn't leave it anywhere, but when he got home, he went into his and when the political season was over, he took it off his car.
Or like pizza cars have.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's anybody has any issue with that. I think it's these, they kind of, it's like,
Billboard-esque.
yeah, like right now, H&R Block, there are several employees on 7th that they've been putting lots of things on their cars, but I just came down the hill like 20 minutes ago. They're gone. I mean, and I know as soon as tax time's over, that's going to really, it's not, I don't think that's an issue. I think people are talking about the real extreme version, and I know we can't separate that, but there are some cases where, like I said, if somebody has got a sign and it's been parked in a place for longer than, what's legal on the street, then, personally, I'd probably call it in and say, hey, they've been there for 48 hours, 24 hours, get this car moved. And by the way, they have a sign on top of it.
Yeah, so you can only park your car on the spot for 24
Yeah.
hours in the right of way.
Yeah.
So if you want us to look into that again, we can. We did look into it quite a bit, and we didn't find a way to distinguish billboard type signs
Versus
from,
the Pizza Hut thing that they put on their car temporarily.
Versus the for sale.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
have any issue with for sale.
Yeah, but it's a
Or
sign.
when
Well, I
people
agree,
wrap
but I
their
haven't
cars
seen,
in
I haven't seen anybody
images.
abusing that with, you know, a 4x8 sheet of plywood on top of their car, you know. So,
And I
You
think
want-
as we have this discussion,
Gotcha.
maybe that's something that we kind of put. Because
On
here's,
the-
here's what I've honestly found is that there's a lot of reaction to political signs that are here for
very temporary.
2 months.
Yeah.
And how much energy and expense do you put? You know, so I agree, and I remember exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, the one at
on
Sportcraft
both
Landing,
both
yeah.
occurrences.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like I said, maybe that's something that kind of gets filtered out, and we say, okay, maybe we come back and look at this, and we have that discussion. You know, can we get through the other 95% and agree? Okay, let's
Yeah.
move this, and
No,
this may take further work.
The incident at Sportcraft was not the fact that it was a political sign. It was the fact that somebody had put their sign on the city sign on public property, and I knew that it wasn't.
We have code for that now.
Yeah, and I know. I
We've
mean,
solved
that
that
was the
problem.
issue. I didn't really care what the sign said. It was just like, wow, they've got, you know,
Yeah, they just added it,
Yeah.
threw it up.
they just thought they could do that, and I said, well, I don't think you can really do that.
Well, before we go too deep into this discussion, can we get through her slideshow and then get into the discussion part?
However
So
you
let me
like to
know
go.
as we're
Yeah.
going through this, again,
Oh,
if
yes, you
there's
are.
anything that you want us to look into further, or if you have any issues with.
I do,
Yeah.
since I just interrupted, I do have, you mentioned murals,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to throw out the mural on 7th and Main.
The one that's falling apart.
Yeah, it's like completely peeled off the wall, and there's chunks coming off.
10th? There's one on 10th.
It's 10th
right
and
by,
10th and Main. It's the
Yeah.
this and that shop. That's the
Right.
one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 10th and 7th up here, so yeah. Right there.
I believe they're working on a grant with Metro
Yeah.
Okay.
to try and work to do some repairs and replace
But anyway,
everything.
That one had underwent some fix up about 4 years ago because it was having, I think, the same problem it's having now.
So I think Laura will kind of walk through
Yeah.
what we've come up with as an idea of how to address murals and the size, and so we can have that discussion too, because it is something, because technically they're not allowed, they're too large, et cetera. So how do we try to accommodate them?
So again, our sign code is really detailed because we do sign permits over the counter, and so we need this level of detail. So
Absolutely.
tonight, get ready. Again, the legal requirement for, we can look at time, place, and manner of signs. We can't look at what signs say. The following code I'm going to give you is sort of summaries of our code. It's not going to be word for word. You'll notice that some of these slides are wordy. Sorry.
That's all right.
This is a summary
Just don't read
of
it.
our purpose regulations. Of our existing code that we have, the only thing that's new, other than some minor rewording, is the last one, to support economic development of the city. Other than that, the purpose of our sign code is to allow signs that are compatible, they're safe, people can still get around the city, there's no nuisances, maintain and enhance the scenic and other aesthetic qualities of the city. Does that look good with everybody? This has also gone through our sign code community advisory team, played a key role in all of this code language. They put together a draft for recommendations, and you'll note there's footnotes on the draft code that we have where we either disagreed or they didn't come to a conclusion on certain issues. So where there's any of those, they're explained in our code.
So maybe let me ask a question about the last bullet point. I can see a bunch of landmines with that.
And it's not a specific wording either.
Well, no,
It's
but I
just-
mean, support economic development. I mean, if their sign looks crappy, how is that supporting economic development? You know, it's real subjective. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's supposed to mean what I think it means. Don't start laughing, Charles. But I mean, you could look at that from the positive aspect, and you could look at it from a negative aspect.
Do you think that we should take it out of this code?
I'm not sure what it means. I guess that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
so we'll clarify what it means.
Because
It's vague.
I could say that having neat and orderly and signs in good repair does promote economic development because it makes our community look better, blah, 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 blah. But then somebody could come in
It's so hard. 'cause
with
it's content
something
neutral.
to say, oh, I'm putting this up because it promotes economic development, and their place looks kind of all jumbly and there's all these stuff and they're in bad repair. I mean, You know, I don't know what that.
Well,
You
yeah.
can add some specificity.
Because like my concern would be this space for rent, but it's a sign that they're moving from place to place to place, and it's become faded, and it's dirty, and whatever. I mean, yes, they're trying to promote economic development. This space is for rent or lease or whatever, but it's not attractive, so it looks like this place abandoned.
Does this help a little bit? Because like I said, Laura kind of paraphrased some of this.
Sure.
So the purpose, this chapter regulates construction, placement, maintenance of signs, protect and enhance public health, safety, welfare, and property. The code, and then it says allows signs, so it says the code supports the economic development of Oregon City businesses.
That's more clarity.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's like saying the code that we've adopted, we believe, if it's
Yes.
implemented, supports the economic development. Okay. Or,
As
I'm
long
sorry,
as they're in a
economic,
neat and orderly and
which
whatever,
is
yes.
what we're
Well,
hopefully
again, though, that
codifying.
becomes subjective. I'm trying to support it, and I'm,
being
so
told that.
now you're telling me that my sign looks like crap, and I don't want to spend $30 to buy a new one.
We'll talk about our maintenance standards.
I think we should have a crap patrol.
So definitions,
Way too
I don't
much.
expect you to read this real quick,
didn't
but
say
this is
you.
a summary of all our new definitions. We did take out some
Not me.
definitions and we reworded some definitions slightly as well. Some of our definitions in there weren't exactly content neutral, so those were removed. And these new definitions clarify a few things. One of the definitions that you'll see are air-blown signs, which we don't have, so we added further specificity to our code, specifically under the prohibited section. Also,
That's the one
attention
that was
flags, also known as flutter, feather, teardrop, or blade flags. They're the skinny, long things.
That look like a feather. Yeah.
They're added under prohibited as well, so the definitions to
Do
support
we have
them.
anything under balloons?
Yep, they're already prohibited.
They are?
The balloons specifically are prohibited in
Oh,
our
okay.
current code, and they will remain prohibited in this
So you wouldn't
proposed.
necessarily put it in the definition?
These are just the new ones.
New definitions.
Yeah.
The one thing I would suggest under attention flag is that I know I went to Elmer's Flag and Banner recently, and there is another name in the trade that they use for that.
We thought we covered it, and so let me know if you know
Yeah,
what that
I
is.
will.
I'll look into it.
I have it written down somewhere, so let
We
me.
listed them all,
Yeah.
and we think that we covered them all. But if we missed one, let us know.
I think the other big change will be the A-frame signs
Mm-hmm.
in the public right of way.
Or what about distraction, which would apply to the health, safety, and welfare of not the pedestrian, but the motorist? You get one of these goofy signs that moves or glitters and it's a distraction.
That's under number 3.
The whirligig one.
Result of their
You mean
That
kind of like a
is-
whirligig, Bob?
Something like that.
Yeah.
That is a good question. It's listed under prohibited. We don't allow signs that are moving, rotating, revolving. And then we also add specificity in this code regarding text that change as well.
So where would, now I think that this is my opinion only, this is an iconic sign. I do not want to see the sign that's on KFC go away, because there's hardly any places now that have the turning bucket. And I think that might be in the category
Original
of
specs,
being, mid-century modern. There aren't hardly any.
There's turn here.
The little bucket
Never
does.
noticed it turns?
Well, it has turned. Maybe they
Yes.
stopped turning it, but
I don't think it. So our code now doesn't allow it to turn, and this code will also not allow it
but
to
I mean
turn.
that is a cool sign.
Variance. I mean, there's always.
Sure. Maybe they
Um,
stopped it from
unless it's
turning.
prohibited. But yeah. So the scope of our regulations, our sign code regulates signs on private property. Also, one change that you'll notice from the current sign code is that this also regulates signs on public property or signs in the right of way. The list of things that this sign code doesn't regulate are listed on the screen. One thing that you'll notice is different is that our current sign code exempted all government-owned signs, and this sign code does not. It does exempt government-owned signs in the right-of-way.
So you mean like Red Soils putting up their identification signs would now be regulated?
Yes, on
Okay.
private property, but like street signs and stuff
Yeah,
like
those
that would
things,
still be
yeah.
exempt.
What about megabucks? Is that sign still going to be up? Megabucks and Powerball?
We're content neutral, so if it's on
I
private
wanna
property, it
know-
will
I
still
wanna
have to
know where I
comply.
stand.
Yeah, it will still have to comply. All of the things on the list for signs carried by person down are all new. For exemptions, they're newer because we're now regulating government signs, so we have to specifically exempt or identify which government-owned signs are exempt. Signs carried by people or
Have we had
required by
any
law.
incidences of that?
Huh?
Have we had any signs that people are wearing like a sandwich board thing?
Yeah, well, yeah. All you have to do is go up to the Berry Hill, and you see the guy in the gorilla suit talking about his tan, and then
I must
pizza.
have missed, I must have missed that.
We were-
Little Caesars.
We're running
and
into
Jiffy
free
Lube,
speech
and-
issues when we start regulating signs held by people.
We've run
Well,
into
if they're-
both. We've run into both advertising outside of a business, just a person standing there spinning the sign, and we've also had activists with signs. So we've had both.
We
But
exempt if
Is
you're
a
holding
gorilla suit a
it,
sign?
because we know that sign's
holding
going
the
away
sign.
once
Oh,
you
he's
walk
holding the
away.
sign. Okay, all right.
This is kind of a weird thing, but I'm going to say it because I'm a sci-fi geek. Do we have any regulation on signs that emit, like,
Lasers?
well, either lasers or
Holographic signs.
Cigarette smoke?
yeah, not necessarily cigarette smoke, but smoke or sound, because I know that when I was overseas, walking down some of the shadier streets
You? Oh, no.
of government business,
That's right.
that they had like motion sensors on underneath their signs hanging out over the street.
Taking
And so when
them
you
to
walked
survey.
underneath, they'd say, "Hey, come on into our place," blah 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 blah. And granted, this is where I'm completely geeking out with sci-fi, but under Minority Report, remember where they did the little like laser thing in your eyes and then they directed your advertisement to it? That's kind of happening now,
Google
where
Glasses.
people are the shop owners and such are stripping your information off your phone and then targeting your coupons and all that sort of stuff.
So we have a couple different things to regulate that. One is that you'll notice later we only allow the text of a sign to change once a day, so it couldn't identify someone and then do advertising specifically to that person. The text can't change. We also have the general city code for smell, noise, that kind of thing. We do have in our sign code something that says you can't be too bright. So the list of stuff we don't regulate are signs like inside of a building, but we still regulate it if it has light that you can see from the right-of-way or from an adjacent property. So there is an exception for light.
So if somebody puts like I've seen them strobes,
Yeah.
they'll put it inside and then all of a sudden it starts,
So just because it's inside of a building
Doesn't
doesn't
mean
mean,
it's okay.
even though signs on the inside of the
Okay.
building. So for lights, we have that sealed in our sign code. Smell, noise, anything like that would just be our general city nuisance code,
So
unless we need to add something.
We don't have something that addresses noise coming from a sign.
okay, and right now it would be legal for a shop owner to have the ability to strip your ID off your phone and say, "Hey, Tony, come on in."
they only do that on leverage.
Not sure how you differentiate it from going up to the drive-through and placing your order and having that communication back and
They
forth.
don't know who you are.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I mean, right now people are stripping information off smartphones and getting specific data on people. Now, I mean, this is the sign code, so maybe it needs to be a city ordinance rather than part of any sign code. But, I mean,
It's not necessarily related to a
advertising.
sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's a
advertising is what
technology.
I'm looking at.
Yeah. Then you get into the free speech.
What about the window murals that are cartoonish, that painted with tempera?
Inside or out?
Well,
They're usually on the outside, but
Outside of window counts as a wall sign. Inside of the window doesn't count.
is that right?
so like when Mike's has their strawberry shake special, they paint it on the outside of, there's a group of people that go around and they paint these things on, there's changes all the time.
They're supposed to get a sign
A
put
lot
in
of
each
them,
time.
a lot of them are on the outside
They
because
are.
they're easily applied. They don't disrupt business by having him go inside and step into a pew and over a guy eating a hamburger, and, you know, but I find them kind of attractive, but you know, do they, what'd you say they qualify as?
So if it's on the wall and it doesn't project more than a
No,
foot.
on the window.
So wall, window, as long as it's on the outside of a building and it doesn't project more than a foot, it's a wall sign. So it's going to be flush because it's painted, so it would be a wall sign. So you would need a wall sign permit each time you did it on the outside, technically.
Would that apply to the allowable square feet of the sign? It would.
But if they were to apply that same graphic on the inside of the glass, that's not covered.
They're kind of hard to paint on the inside.
Well,
Then the flip side of that is for site plan design review under our transparency standards as well. When on the
That's-
inside we have some regulations saying you can't cover all your windows
With
because we want
stuff.
transparency as well. So there's maximums on the inside through site plan
Alrighty
design
then.
review.
All right.
well, but how does that apply? I mean, I have my building, it's all built, and now I want to put a butcher paper sign up in every one of my windows advertising that my meat's on sale, my beer's on sale, my cigarettes are on sale, how does site plan and design review affect that now that
Code
my,
enforcement, there could be a code enforcement that could be either initiated by the city or a complaint saying you no longer comply with your transparency standards. And then we would have to talk to them about that, which I can't really think of an example of where that's happened.
oh, I can't.
Well, no, of where we've done
Oh.
the code enforcement part for that.
Let's put that on the, let's think about that.
So we come back to this, the original question I had is about enforcement.
You bet, yeah.
Compliance. We want people to comply.
Well,
We only want to
compliance-
enforce them if they
well,
don't comply.
We can say the same thing about the numerous complaints we've had about people speeding through their neighborhood.
Yes.
They're not complying with
Yes.
the speed limit.
But we want enforcement there.
Yeah, so.
So permits are required for all signs except for those listed on the screen flags, smaller signs, so 6 square feet or less. And then change of copies. So if you already have a sign and you're taking out the plastic piece and then putting in a new plastic piece because maybe you're a new tenant or something.
Like at a shopping center.
No permits required. And so that is similar to our existing code today, except for today you need a permit if it's more than 4 square feet. So it's bumped up a little bit to 6 based
Well,
on.
better
When people
classify
take
with
out a
that.
business permit, opening up a new business or renewing an old business, a business license, I should say, is there any standards or compliance message there that you will comply with? The city of Oregon City has a sign permit, and all businesses are expected to comply. Some language to that effect.
No, it's for certain on our home occupation license. I think it's on the regular business license. I'll have to double check and verify for you. But
Yeah.
But I think it's a good
believe it is.
opportunity for the
I think it's a
education.
Yeah,
great
yeah,
opportunity
yeah,
when they renew their business license to put something in there about the sign code. I think that's
So one of the things that
amazing.
regarding enforcement is the education, and so one of the things we'll talk about the next time is coming up with pamphlets for each user. So for a home occupation, here's some typical standards for signage, and for businesses, here's typical standards, and here is it written out in a format that's doesn't look like it was written by a lawyer. So giving that information with the business license is one avenue.
I
which we
think that would
pursue.
really be lighten the load on administration.
Because then they can't say they didn't get it.
Yeah. So for the sign permit process, again, it's over the counter. You have to have your permit filled out. You have to pay your fees. Your permit has to comply with our sign code as well as any other applicable code like building codes and structural safety codes. Your permit's void after 90 days if you don't build the sign. If you do build the sign within 90 days, then your permit is good for the life of the sign.
What if you're still in construction at the 90 days?
Then they took their permit out too long. You can get an extension, I presume.
There is no, we can clarify that the sign permit has to be, or the building permit associated with the sign has to be issued. Normally they go up pretty quick, but I'll make a note and we can clarify that it either has to be constructed or issued.
Well, it's just, my concern is that you end up with people slapping up, requesting signs under current code, knowing that there's going to be changes that they don't like, and then they just keep these permits active because they stuck a pole in the ground. Well, we're still building our sign, you know, so they get this grandfather clause in while they're trying to find out who's going to build in the, you know, on the vacant lot.
Yeah, this code doesn't really, I mean, because they could put in a blank sign and then just switch out the copy.
That's true.
That would be an option if someone wanted to do that. The sign code sizes, for the most part, the wall sizes are changing, but the big freestanding signs, there's no change to those size requirements. There are changes to some of the placement requirements, which make it friendlier.
And that's this code, but, you know, in 20 years, people are going to, hopefully before 20 years, change the code again, or at least look at it again. And so we need to have the goalposts in place about whether or not it's fully constructed, under construction, building permit issue, whatever, so that they can't say, you moved the goalpost, you put it up just to prohibit me from building my sign, blah, blah, blah. So,
That is a good point. We will clarify that. One thing that this code has that the other code doesn't have is we have language regarding abandoned signs, and abandoned signs means that there's no sign in the sign cabinet, basically. There's no sign face. And if you don't have a sign face for more than 6 months, then you have to remove your sign.
what if you have a sign up for businesses that no longer exist?
I mean, as long as you
You get
have
into
something
content.
in there, so you don't see the light in the middle. I mean, most
Flip
people
'em
will flip
over,
them over
yeah.
or something. Is there something in there, you're fine. But once you take it out, that's how we're regulating abandoned signs, is there's physically nothing there. So if you were to build just the case around the sign but not put it in a sign, if it's that way for more than 6 months, it'd have to go away.
So even though the business no longer exists and has in fact had parts physically removed so that it couldn't be reconstituted, the sign can stay up there forever.
Exactly, because we're content neutral, so we can't read the sign and say if it's old or new.
Well, there was a sign up on Malala Avenue when Darlene Hooley had an office there, and it was there forever. And
Yep.
she had been out of office.
Well, it's kind of like a building, right? I mean, you built a building 30 years ago, and our code's changed, and the building's been vacant. It's just I understand where you're coming from on this one, and we struggle with this of how do you make someone address a sign where you've had a vacancy for an extended period of time without reading the sign and saying Tony's car shop hasn't been here for 10 years. Take down Tony's car shop sign. Because it is an investment, it is an
Well,
infrastructure.
we get them to flip it, I guess.
The only avenue that we found for addressing that was to require a yearly permit, or, instead of them being good for the life of the sign, they're good for a shorter amount of time. And
That's
the
just an
consensus
administrative
was that
nightmare.
was just more
Yeah.
work.
Well, common sense, I
Or
mean,
more
just
money.
common sense says that the sign on the premises must apply to the business on the premises.
Which we can't do.
You can't do that.
No.
So you can put a sign on there that applies to a business
Yes. You could say whatever
half
it
a
is
mile
you
down
want.
the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's
It
what the
could-
Burma Shave
or-
Company did.
Could not even apply to a business. It could be. It could be.
Could be
my
Tony
name really
Conkle's the
big.
best community development director in Oregon. you
That's
know? I
right.
mean,
I'll put that
You
up.
know, like the one you've got in Southern Oregon. You know,
God,
Yeah.
that was over in Lincoln City.
Lincoln City. Yeah.
I'm coming over to get that sign. I'll put it in my yard,
But I mean, this is where we struggle with the content part of it.
as long as it's under.
Well, and frankly, I'm not as concerned about the sign that's obsolete as I am about the sign that is dilapidated.
Dated, yeah.
So
Yeah,
we-
yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And-
guess that's where I'd like to see at least something in there about maintaining the sign. If
Yeah.
it starts to look like it's crumbling and falling apart, it ought to be
Or rusting.
maintained.
Yeah.
Can't
Yeah.
do that unless we have specific standards. So we can say if it's ripped more than an inch or something like that. We can't say if the paint faded.
Mm-hmm.
We can't say
You say you can't?
no, because then you have to. First off, you have to come up with a measurement to how to measure faded paint. But what if they want it to look faded? I mean, you can't do content. You can only do. You can't. You could say if there's more than ½ inch of dirt.
If
or
it's in disrepair.
you can't say disrepair. You
Because
have
you
to
don't know the
specify
definition.
exactly.
Rust might be just called
So
art in
this
another
is-
place.
This
we
is
can
strange.
define
It's-
it, can't we?
It's so much less. It's so much less discretionary than you guys are used to seeing at your level. It's very specific, and if we can't do it in a very specific manner, being content neutral, then we can't do it.
Well, there's a feather sign on near the intersection of Beaver Creek and Malala Avenue that is coming out of its frame, and I would definitely consider that to be in disrepair and ripped.
Unless they intended it to be that way, or
no,
you know what I mean.
No, I saw it when it was new. It's been there a very long time. They were never designed to be sitting out forever.
So our code would have to specify.
Like I said, it's the frame, and it has become detached from its frame. So that's sort of flapping in the breeze, and it's all shredded.
They're
Well,
prohibited on
and
this
I
code,
guess the thing that I would say is that there is probably a way to establish the criteria that this was the original design of the sign. And if it deviates from the original design of the sign as approved in the permit, then it needs to be either repaired or removed.
That might be a good
we
way
allow
of saying
change of copy without a permit, so it would deviate if you do a change of copy.
No,
I think what you're saying, the actual structure itself.
Yeah, I'm not talking about copy at all. I'm talking about the condition of the
Yeah.
sign
the
itself.
construction.
And if you were to require that with the application for the permit, there was a design with the sign permit that says this is the design of the sign, so that somebody could objectively look at the sign 10 years down the road and say, this is in
it doesn't
disrepair.
look anything like what it
it's-
was when it was built.
It's now leaning at a 40-degree angle,
Yeah,
but it's still
originally the
structural.
sign
That would
was
actually be easy,
straight,
yeah.
and now it's
Well.
tipping over. And
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
it was of painted metal and now it's 85% rust. You know, I mean,
I'm suggesting that you could have
A
objective
comparison.
criteria that has nothing to do with whether you
Content.
like the content or not.
Well, what is it that is, what I recall is that they had to submit a drawing or photo or whatever it is of what the sign was going to be when they submitted their permit. So then you have, okay, here's what it looks like. And I don't think that has anything to do with content.
Right, and if it says the frame of the sign will be painted, and 10 years down the line, you look at it and you go, well, all the paint's chipped off. It needs to either be repainted or rebuilt.
I'll look into maintenance standards. We did some research previously and couldn't find any that passed the lawyer test.
What do they
but
do in Lake Oswego?
We
'Cause
didn't compare it to the Let me look into
they have a
it.
I mean,
pretty
that-
tight
it's just-
sign
There's got to
code.
be a way.
Yeah.
There really does.
Okay, so this is a new section. We added a section specifically identifying how we measure sign faces and sign structures and sign heights and clearance. And we have these pretty little diagrams to help demonstrate it. Our signage standards look at the sign face and not the size of the structure holding up the sign face. Heights measured to from the average grade on the front of the sign to the uppermost point of the sign. So for different things in our code, height's measured differently. And then clearance is measured from the average grade to the lowermost point of the sign.
so for instance, on 7th Street with that huge slope, it's basically measured from the middle of the sign for height.
So our height for signs are now going to be to the uppermost part of the sign.
Right, but it's at what point do you measure it? At the upper part of the slope of 7th or at the bottom part of the slope of 7th?
Average.
That's what I
Oh,
was.
average on the bottom, upper
The average
on the
grade
most
and
for
then the topmost
toppest.
part of the sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it may not be directly above. If it's slanted and the average grade is here, we would measure from here to
Freestanding sign.
Freestanding, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I consider that a ground sign. I consider a freestanding sign one that it's on a pole.
So we consider them all the same, just not attached to a building.
Okay.
Either pole or ground.
I guess
either
it
way.
does look like free. Okay.
So it's either on a wall, on a roof.
On a podium.
On the ground.
That's
Yes.
the sign structure that's.
Or projecting. Okay, so now we're going to go into our sign code. So I have some pictures to show you to give you some sense of scale because I'm giving you size dimensions. So
So this is a blade sign?
this is a blade sign. I'm going to run through these pictures pretty quick. They were
Okay.
provided from Melissa Hayden from Security Signs
So
during our process. They're just to give you a sense of how big a sign is when we say 16 square foot sign.
That's under 16 square feet.
So this one's 16 square feet.
Wait.
Yep.
No, it isn't.
You said it has a diameter of 4 feet.
So that
The
makes
total
it-
square is.
So if I
total
made the
size.
circle into a square, it'd be 16
So
square feet?
you measure the square, not the circle.
So it's going to be slightly under 16 square feet,
Oh,
but
okay.
yes.
Okay.
And then this one, so that's what an 18 square foot sign would look like. So you can compare it to others.
The city of Gerhardt?
Yeah.
That's,
It's not Gerhardt, it's,
Gerhardt.
yeah.
Like-
well,
it says
we have it both
Gerhardt.
ways, so you get to pick which way.
I get to pick which one.
Yeah. So here's a 30 square foot sign, so you can kind of get your average. So the sign letters are, a little under 2 feet tall.
Well, the big thing that it's showing me is a 6 square foot sign is a tiny sign.
So here's 33, about 34. So the
But see, that's attractive.
10 inches for each of those letters.
Mm-hmm.
36 square feet. So this is 3 by 12. A little bit bigger sign here. 225 square feet, and then the A is 8 feet 4 inches.
You don't have the IKEA one on here. That was quite controversial.
No, we don't.
That was huge.
They didn't give it to us. We didn't ask.
Yeah.
So 32 square feet. So here's just a freestanding sign, we would call it.
Mm-hmm.
So go back to that last one. I'm just
Yes.
curious. So the bottom part of the sign that's below the white area with the frame, would that be considered part of the sign, or is that
You're talking about the tan area?
the tan area at the bottom? That's
That's part of the sign.
just the base
It would be the sign structure, not the sign
structure.
face.
Yeah.
So you don't count it until it's actually the frame around the sign itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's how we had been operating under our current code, but it wasn't really written in the code.
I guess my concern about that is that you can use your structure as part of your sign. For instance, a cutlery store using a giant knife and then the sign hanging below it.
So the stand of the sign is a design of something.
Yeah.
A knife.
Right, and so it's clearly part of the advertising. It's also part of the structure. Shouldn't it be part of the total square footage or cube of the sign?
Our definition of sign includes something that is meant for advertising purposes, so
Yeah.
you could consider that part of the sign, even though it's part of the structure.
I would if it's a knife, and that
Okay.
they're
No, I just-
advertising.
I just didn't want there to be I've got a 37-foot knife next to my 6 square foot sign, so my sign is compliant.
But you could have a big standalone wall
Mhm.
with a little sign, because the size of the wall
Well.
wouldn't count.
Even if it's Acme wall construction.
If it had a sign on it, then it counts. Or I mean, that part counts.
Or how about Acme Anvil?
So a sign means any sign, display message, emblem, figure, painting, drawing,
Drawing.
placard, poster, billboard, carving, or other thing that is designed, used, or intended to convey a message or image and is used to inform or attract the attention of the public. And the term includes the sign structure, display surface, and other component parts of a sign. When dimensions of a sign are specified, the term includes panels and frames, and the term includes both
Keep
sides
that
of the
covered.
sign.
Okay, so
Kind of tried to catch it in the
I think
definition
you-
of what's
I think
a
you
sign.
did.
So if Joe's Eatery just wants to have a knife and fork crossed over their door, it's a sign and
Yes.
they got it.
If they're a restaurant, yeah, I would say so.
So here's a 45 square foot sign, so it's about 10 feet tall.
And that includes that little white angle part that's coming out of it. You take that whole, it's
Nope.
where you have the arrow. Is
Nope.
that's part of the sign?
Only the wood section,
Only the wood section.
Okay, why wouldn't that be part of the sign?
because it's the structure holding the wood part
Structure.
in place.
Well, you said that the ground sign that's for the church,
That ground part, that tan part did not count.
Did not
that
count.
did, oh, I thought you
Did
said
not
it did.
count. No, it
Okay.
did not.
If you want us to count it, we can.
I think we're catching that through the height requirement of the structure.
Right, okay.
So you're actually looking at where the advertisement,
Okay.
the sign part is.
Okay,
Yeah, the only thing I see is that they're, like Damon's suggesting, is at some point, the structure that is holding the graphic part of the sign could be part of the sign just because of the way it's designed.
Good.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have any examples of that. Do we have
No, we-
Ronald McDonald holding something?
Bob's Big Boy.
Isn't there a giant
Right.
golf ball on 82nd Avenue?
I believe so.
What?
Could be.
A giant golf
Giant
ball
golf
on
ball.
82nd.
We would consider that its sign itself. So I guess it is a little bit dependent on what your structure looks like.
Okay.
Which is a
Here-
potential bone of contention, so.
Here's a 15-foot tall sign, 50 square feet. So our code would generally allow this. Our code for freestanding signs
That
did not.
include-
It would allow this.
What's included?
Um,
The reader board part, and then where it says tabernacle, and then the little flames or whatever that is?
Basically from the
But not the
bottom of the
whole-
And
white
then you'd
sign
square
up to the
that
top.
off? Okay.
and our code also says if you have bits and pieces, you have to add the bits and pieces
Pieces,
together.
okay.
This one may look familiar in West End.
Never seen that one before.
So this one is 130 square feet. So
That
the
is
biggest
big.
sign you can do in our sign code currently, and our sizes for large freestanding signs haven't changed, is 150 square feet. So you do want this size in Oregon City if you had a lot of frontage.
Like a
So
shopping
be-
center.
So-
The size is tied to the frontage.
Frontage, okay, so let me ask a question. Let's say I own the Willamette Marketplace, and I have this sign, but I also have another frontage, because I believe my frontage on this particular shopping center fronts on I-205,
So I-205 we didn't count as a frontage in our
Okay.
definition of frontage.
because it's not a frontage.
But I think this one does have another frontage on the
It has a
backside
frontage
by the
on
Burger
Willamette,
Place.
it has a frontage on Willamette Drive.
So that would count for another frontage.
Okay,
Frontage being defined as a access
Right-of-way.
point.
We defined it right of way, public or private right of way, not freeway, as frontage.
okay.
So non-private property. Okay, so now let's get into a little bit of our code. So I'm going to go through each section.
Laura, hold on. I think there was, this I think is something we had to, so when we define frontage means the full length of a parcel of property that abuts a dedicated street, highway, freeway, or a city approved vehicular public access agreement. Number one, note that highways and freeways are considered frontages.
But you don't have any access.
All right,
off them.
sorry, that note is wrong.
Oh.
We took that out before we did the draft language.
I would just add not,
So it,
Does not include frontage on a highway.
wait,
or-
hold on, never mind.
which is not good
It
because
does.
99 doesn't.
Sorry. I apologize.
No, that's why we're having this.
So in this draft of the code, it does say that abuts a dedicated street, highway, freeway, or city-approved vehicular public access easement. So the highway and freeway do count as frontages. Do you
Okay,
want-
so in my Willamette Marketplace example, I could have
Yes.
another sign abutting I-205, so people whipping down I-205 will know that they could go get Les Schwab tires.
As long as your total square footage was in compliance with your total frontage.
Yeah. It's gotta
Yeah,
be
so
that.
we look at each separately.
It's gotta be that
for
way.
the size. So are you comfortable with that? Did you want to keep highways and freeways as frontages?
No, I think that
Because you
makes
have to,
sense.
because 99 goes right through town. It's part of
And
our,
99 to 13.
Mhm.
Freeways, do we want to keep in as frontages? Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, under our
Yeah,
existing
consider
code,
99 a
frontage
freeway.
means the continuous distance along one street right-of-way line of one premises, provided such street is improved for public travel, is what our current definition of.
Yeah, and that, I think that makes sense.
I don't have a problem with a highway, but freeway.
freeway.
No
But,
freeways.
but frontage goes along with the ownership of the site, doesn't it? Property owner owns the frontage. Spread of land, it just butts up against the right of way.
Yeah, so they get a sign for every portion which they're abutting right of way,
But
whether
it's
it's public or
implied that they
private.
own the property. Their property under your ownership, which fronts on a public this or that, can be counted towards the area of the sign. 'Cause if you don't do it that way, then how are you gonna do it?
Yeah, so we do measure it off the length of their property, which abuts.
Now,
Exactly.
Their property being what I'm getting at.
Exactly.
But what I'm hearing is public streets, we all in agreement. 99E as a highway, we're all in agreement. The question is 205 is a freeway.
Right.
I don't have any objection to the
No.
freeway.
No,
I mean,
it
it's,
doesn't bother me.
it all falls into the same.
Yeah, I do. Because part of that is going to be regulated by the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Well, they can't get a double dip, so if they're getting a sign under the state code, then they can't also have another sign under the city code.
But
They-
I, as the owner of the Willamette Marketplace, might want to try to do that.
You can't, we wouldn't, so we wouldn't allow them to do anything under the state code. It has to comply with city code.
Well, I'm just saying that once you've got a sign there, you only get one kick at the can. You don't get one for the state and one for the city.
We have a couple of properties that front they front a street like Clackamas River Drive,
Right.
and then they have on the backside is freeway.
Right.
So if we count freeways, they would get a total of 2 signs: one that they would put on the city Clackamas River Drive part, and one on the freeway part.
But do
So
they?
if we want to count, and then also like Oregon City Shopping Center, they could get one for 99E, and then if we count the freeway's frontage, they would get one for the part that faces
And they
the
get one
on-ramp
for Main
part.
Street Extension.
They don't have frontage on there?
No.
Well-
Because
There's a little tax line in between.
Right. Well, they already tried to get one on the freeway side, and it was denied.
But
Yeah,
they-
there was a variance.
They
passed.
already exceeded the
Yeah. Oh,
total
yeah. It's
amount
like
of signage.
yeah,
that
they have a
were allowed.
gihugic sign.
Yeah.
So there are a couple cities or places in the city where if we want to count the
And ODOT
freeway as
didn't like it
frontage,
anyway.
they would get an additional freestanding sign.
Nope.
Like if you get on 205 north off of 213, there's the Red Barn.
Car wash.
No, there's
They sell barns.
they sell the sheds that go in.
Oh, the shed guy. Yeah, down on Clackamas.
Right, so that's the example of where you're double, you have frontage on
Yeah.
Well,
the local street and then frontage on the.
Right.
Well, does the state issue signs in the manner in which we issue signs?
The state has regulations for signage adjacent to the freeway, but if we don't allow it within our city, it doesn't
It doesn't
matter.
allow there.
it's the more restrictive
Okay.
rules that are out.
Applicable. Right.
And so you'll get another version of the sign code on April 14th, so any of these tweaks will.
Well, I guess
will-
my thought about this is that I'd want to include freeways under our regulation, because then we can regulate the signs. If we don't say anything about it, then what's to,
They can't have it on their private property, even if it's near a freeway.
That's right. You
Now,
see what she's saying?
If a business gets an allotment because they're on, their frontage is on the freeway, do we have a requirement that the corresponding signs be facing the freeway, or can they allot those signs anywhere on their property?
No, it's only for the frontage. They can't take the frontage from Street Y and then
Double
transfer
dips.
all of that over to Street X and make their sign.
Yeah, that's what
Three
They have
Yeah.
a lot of latitude where they put it.
Right,
on the
but-
We don't have setbacks.
Yeah, but they can't do a combination of signage for a frontage where it might not be quite as visible.
or put 2 signs on the same frontage because
Yeah.
they're taking the back each sign and putting
Right, on the front.
Because you only get one
One
per frontage.
front per frontage.
Yeah.
So before you get into the categories, is this an opportunity? If you say no, it's okay. I have a couple of questions about the definitions.
Yeah.
So I want to be very clear. I looked at the definition that we have for flag, and I'm not going to assume that you mean like the state of Oregon flag or the Oregon City Shopping Center flag. We're just talking a flag.
We're content neutral.
Well, what was the intent?
It could be an American flag. It could be an advertising flag. It could be a Arbor Day flag.
So if it's an advertising flag, does that count as a pole sign that's part of their
Yeah, that's a good question. So we listed them. You get 2 ancillary sign. We'll get into
Yeah,
it, but you get 2
but yeah,
ancillary signs.
but I'm just talking about the flags.
And it lists flags as being an ancillary sign.
Okay.
If you want more, then you could make it your freestanding sign.
Okay, so let's say I want to fly the McGriff family crest on a flagpole under the American flag on my property.
So you don't need a permit for flags.
Not that I would, but
So if it's on,
Why not?
That's a good segue. If it's on residential property, you get a wall sign for each wall, for each side of the frontage, a freestanding sign if there is no wall sign, and then you get 2 ancillary signs, and that would be signs equal to or less than 6 square feet, or flags. So you could
okay.
have
Well,
a
I
couple
have
of
I have a
flags.
ton of questions about that, but I wanted to get back to the definitions.
So you could have them, flags fall under the ancillary signs. So you don't need a permit for them. You can have a couple per property. So if you want your state flag and the
McGriff
United
family
States
crest, I could have.
flag.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that works.
Okay, so that's flag. So then the other definition I had a question about was natural materials.
Yes.
And I have to be honest with you, I did a little research. Metal is not a natural material. You have to manufacture metal. You don't take metal out of the ground and it becomes poof. Copper or gold, yes.
You don't with cotton, you don't with flax. you
No,
don't
but
with-
we're saying primarily natural materials, wood, stone, brick, rock, or any combination thereof. So if I wanted to put up a sign in the McLaughlin Conservation District, and let's say it was a little sign and I had metal brackets, that's not primarily. The rest of the sign would be carved wood and I used metal to hold the, I'm thinking, okay, let's say
The neighborhood sign.
the big City of Oregon City sign, there are some metal brackets on it. Let's say I would say that is primarily of natural materials. The base is stone, it's wood. The brackets are very, very incidental. But if you're saying, primarily, again, metal is not a natural material.
Yeah. So, so background in that is, so we made some tweaks from our existing code because primarily, so we kept the definition of natural materials the same, which does include metal.
Right.
So if we want to take that out or reword it, we can choose which way we want to do. Signs in residential zones, including conditional uses, are required to be primarily, which we clarified in the newer code, to be 51% or more natural materials, which of course includes metal. So I guess the questions there are, we can reword it so it says.
I don't have a problem if it's metal, but I'm being
Okay.
nitpicker.
But
metal
reword
is
it.
not a natural material.
Okay.
it just isn't.
Okay.
Well, and I gotta say, neither is anything else.
Wood is a natural material, and you can carve it into a sign. You can carve a rock.
And you can pick up a chunk of iron ore and beat it into its shape, or copper. Hey, gee whiz, what's that? Oh, it was the Bronze Age. Oh,
But you have to do something to it.
You have to do something to the
that's
wood.
why-
What if we
No,
change
you only
the
have to.
definition?
You only have to carve
What if we
it.
change the definition from natural materials to acceptable materials or approved materials means X, Y, Z that way? Because brick's technically not natural either.
Yeah, I
But
would-
you form it
I
out
would
of
agree.
you form it. Yeah.
More definition because
You
natural
work it just like
materials
you
is
work
pretty
Well,
murky.
So
I
acceptable
don't have any
materials
problem
or
if you're
approved-
talking about a
appropriate.
substantial amount of the sign being made out of
Commonly used
natural
to
materials,
construct
like
a sign.
75% or more.
We're saying 51.
I don't want to see somebody take a big plate of metal and carve their name out of it and call that a natural material sign, which it wouldn't be.
So we will, it sounds like we'll change our, rather than saying natural material, we'll change what that is called.
No,
and
I
we'll
like
keep
it being natural material because I'm being very
But
I'm being very NIMBY-ish, because in the conservation district,
Which is
we would,
separate
right,
then,
we would
because
like to
you'll-
see signs primarily made out of natural materials. Like I said, if they have a metal bracket on it, that's not primarily. Primarily, to me, is a substantial amount of the sign is made out of something that's natural.
Yeah, so signs, obviously in historic districts, will also have to go through compliance with Historic Review Board and those
Right.
design guides, which look at that.
Okay.
So if I understand right, you don't necessarily have a problem with metal being used, or you do?
No, I don't have a problem with metal being
Just
used.
how we're defining
It's
it.
not a natural material.
So,
Okay.
Right, I think that the word natural material
right,
is
so if we can come up with a different name
misused
than
there.
other than natural.
And I would hate to see us get to the point where we're limiting creativity as part of the sign design, because I've seen some very attractive signs that probably had virtually no natural material in them by the definition of it being, rock or something that you would dig out of the ground.
This natural material was applying in residential zones,
Right,
correct?
that's what I'm talking
residential
about
zones.
specifically. I'm not talking about in a commercial zone, or, maybe a laser etch sign would look really cool in a commercial district that you had hanging over you made a laser etch sign, it's a blade sign made out of metal. I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think natural materials would be appropriate in certain districts, but not necessarily as a catch-all for
No,
all
I was
signs.
being very specific. I said in the conservation district.
Right, but the way that this is
Yeah.
reading, it doesn't
So
it
this
doesn't
is-
distinguish that as being any particular place.
So this is for residential zones. It is a requirement for both conditional uses in residential zones as well as single
Gotcha.
family
Okay.
in residential zones.
So we'll take another whack.
And then you answered my question, because I wrote under flags, you said excluding attention. I said, does that include advertising flags like, the Pizza Hut flag, and you answered that question.
Well,
So for
Hold on.
and I guess my issue with the metal being is, if my business is a blacksmith
So,
and the building's been used as a blacksmithery, and I bought it and I rehabbed it in the conservation district, yeah,
And you're in the residential zone?
yeah, because it was a blacksmith, and then Dad sold off all the property except the shop and the house, and now there's 3.5 all around me. But I went to school and became a blacksmith so I could keep bending that iron. Why can't I put up a sign that's got horseshoes or that I twisted? I mean, on the way to
Primarily.
Estacada, there's a guy that's got a great big, American Eagle made out of metal, and it's John's Ironworks. And
He's in an industrial zone.
no, not where he's at in Estacada. But I'm just
Anyway.
saying,
we'll continue to allow metal, but we'll just not call it natural materials for the sign code purposes. But we'll still have all the other regulations.
Right, you'll
for
just say
historic.
that the signs here need to be primarily made of blah, 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 blah,
accepted
blah.
material.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
then-
you can keep natural materials in, because somebody might, but metal maybe is in a different category.
Right. So for residential zones, you get various types of signs. One of the sign types that you'll see that's new in this code are signs in the right-of-way. Right now, we don't have code for signs in the right-of-way. We just say they have to be approved by the city engineer, and we're not aware that the city engineer has ever approved a sign on the ground in the right-of-way. They've approved some of those over-street banners. So we did look at a couple other jurisdictions as guidance, and we called them and see how their sign code is working, and we came up with a sign code for signs in the right-of-way. It allows one for frontage, so you'll see it on the screen. So that would be a totally new type of sign that's not allowed currently.
Now, why do we want to have that? Where is an example in a residential zone you would need to have a sign in the public right-of-way?
We heard a lot of comments from our community advisory team as well as from realtors for signs in the right-of-way. I'll get to signs in the right-of-way a bit more later, but there's specific hours on which they can be posted in the right of way in residential zones, and they're all associated with the hours for common acceptable open houses. Portland has something very similar, so open houses are certain days of the week, normally on Tuesdays and on weekends. So when they put their sign that says open house today, they could get a right of way permit, put up their sign, and put
Aren't
it in
those
the right
usually
of way.
those temporary little A-frames that they come and they go?
So all of our signs in the right of way on the ground have to be an A-frame, and there are specific standards for size, height, material, clearance. We'll get into it in a bit more detail, but yes, they would have to be specifically meeting those standards. They would all require right of way permits. But it is another option if somebody wanted to do that.
Now, see, I guess, as much as I am a stickler, I don't have a problem with those because they come and they go away. What I'm looking at is, why would somebody in a residential zone need a freestanding sign?
So
And maybe I'm crazy and I don't understand this.
So our sign code now allows a freestanding sign, and we're continuing that. There could be a home occupation that would want a freestanding sign, or it could be, I know we're content neutral, but political season, you might want a freestanding sign.
Really?
Well, support my candidate or whatever. So you can,
You'd put it. See, I am having a complete meltdown about this. I just can't. I don't understand this. Why do we want to promote that? I mean, most people put little. I mean, I'm one of them. I put little political signs in my yard, and once political season's over, they're gone away. But I do have a problem with. I know that sometimes realtors don't have a place to put their sign. I do have a problem with them putting them in the parking strip where you're going to get out of a car or you're somewhere and there's this sign. And I'm not blaming any realtor in particular. I'm just saying if you have a house that's for sale, you should put the for sale sign on the property. I don't have any issue with that. Where I have the problem is if they're between the sidewalk and the curb and you have a street that you can park on. To me, that makes absolutely no sense, and sometimes they are a hazard.
But if you have a hedge that goes right up to the curb,
which I do.
then where are you going to put the for sale sign?
When my house was for sale, the realtor put it in the yard that hung above the hedge, and you could see it when you went by.
But you have a multi-level
Yes.
yard.
I got a real high yard.
Some people don't. Some people have yards that slope down from the curb.
I put it in the hedge.
Then it's a wall sign.
Or one of the reasons I don't like them in the, anything in the right of way is because of sight distance clearance at an intersection, or a mother is strolling her child and
Or
she gets
dogs,
behind
they
this,
all go-
this sign, somebody can't see her backing out of a driveway.
Yeah, I know where the clear, I personally know where the clear vision zone is, but, again, if you're a home occupation, the purpose of having the home occupation is that somebody doesn't know that you're really there conducting a business. Why would we want them to be posting a sign in their front yard? If it's supposed to be the primary occupation in the residential zone is to live there, not to have the business there.
we allow like
People have
massage
home
therapists.
businesses.
Yes, but
and
they don't have
lawyers.
freestanding signs in their front yard saying that they've got X, Y, and Z business.
I know one place in my neighborhood where they would if they had a front yard.
Yeah, but then that's not legal right now.
They have it as a wall sign right now.
You can have a
But-
freestanding sign on your front yard as residential right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't like that, we can take
Well,
away.
my understanding was a home occupation had to be placed on on the building.
It could be freestanding as well. And we allow freestanding signs.
So an attorney could hang out his shingle.
Yeah.
Again, if you're a home occupation, the primary purpose of your being there is that you live there, not that you have a business. And people aren't supposed to be having traffic. If you're a lawyer, you're going to have people coming and going.
Yeah.
We allow that. I mean, we allow like massage therapists. As long as you don't sell any goods, we allow we allow services under home
Again,
occupation.
I object to us allowing home occupations to have a freestanding sign. That's not the purpose of that zone.
Well, it sounds to me like you're objecting to them to have a home occupation.
No, they can have a sign on their house. that says I'm a massage therapist, and they're small, they're not, obtrusive.
So just.
But I mean,
so-
I'm trying to get into my
Right.
head. What is, am
So-
I living in a residential zone, or I'm living in a commercial zone where people can live there and then have a business?
Understood. Right now, current sign code in residential areas, all signs in residential zone must comply with the following: no more than one wall sign or
Yeah, I know,
freestanding
I
sign
read
to
it.
be visible from each frontage. That's what we have right now. And so we just kind of brought that over to the existing code. So Denise has raised a point. How about if we keep moving and we'll come back and revisit this?
Sure.
The 5 of you are going to have to make a decision, or
Right.
the 7 when we all get back here. So I don't know if you want to make it right now or if you want to think about it and we'll come back.
No, let's move on.
No, let's
Okay.
put it on
And
the
we'll,
table.
we'll,
Let's
we'll,
put it on-
we'll
let's put it
mark
on
it
the-
as something to
Yeah.
come back.
In the
But I need
parking
you guys
lot.
to think about this because we are going to need some direction on this
Yeah,
one.
let's put it on the table, we'll talk about it more.
Okay, so these are the signage types allowed for residential, sorry, wrong one, my conditional uses.
Nice graphic.
And I guess my question about flags not having any sort of size restriction, that means that I can put the Lattice Motors flag in my yard and there's nothing illegal about that. There's no problem with that. I can have a 75-foot tall pole with a 35-foot.
We have height restrictions still in the zoning
I
designation.
think that
of
flag might
35
cover your
feet.
property, though.
Yeah, pretty much way.
If you would like us to restrict the size of flags, we can. We don't currently, and that is a area where someone could do a very large flag if they want to.
I wouldn't want to see a Lattice Motors size flag.
Well, what is our current height restrictions?
So it's with the zoning designation, so most single-family residential is 35 feet.
So if it's longer than 35 feet, it's dragging on the ground.
Yeah, but if it's my family crest, it doesn't matter.
It could be a tent.
So,
I-
okay.
I will just say that if there isn't a limitation, someone will try it.
All right.
No one has yet.
I hate to say it.
So yeah, nobody has it, so we didn't. So I'm
Dave will
hearing.
have one out tomorrow.
Well,
James is
I'm
gonna
here.
have one tomorrow.
and I want to know where my signal cannon can go.
So we do want to put restrictions for size of flags.
I would think that something like no longer than 50% of the height of the flag stand. Just because at some point you're going to end up with.
Scale, yeah.
Yeah. And could you put a restriction on signal cannons in people's yards?
Nuisance.
So, I don't want to have to turn David in
It's new.
when he's
Supposed to-
firing it off.
All right, now we have a fun little graphic for you. So with each of the zoning designations, we give you examples of what's the most signs I could put on my property, and we have some. You could do a wall sign or a freestanding sign. So there's some options. You can see what types of signage are allowed on property. I'm a good artist, but these aren't to
Is that intended to be
scale.
to scale?
No.
I'm concerned about the freestanding sign that's bigger
So
than
those
the
are
house.
less than.
I have not had any sugar, I assure you.
I'm a
That's
little
what happens when
concerned
you have
about
a planner drawing.
the freestanding
Terrible.
sign that's taller than the house.
So the ancillary signs can be no bigger than 6 square feet, and the right-of-way signs also can't be bigger than 6
And
square
that means
feet.
that no more than 2 political signs per frontage. So if they want to have 3 candidates and 2 issues, they got to decide which 2 they're going to show each day.
Unless they don't have a wall sign, then they can do a freestanding sign. Get a permit for a freestanding sign, and then have 2 smaller ancillary signs.
So, sorry, this is not particularly funny, but obviously, so anyway, so if I want to have 5, I don't know what the size of the little tiny signs are,
Yeah.
but if I want to have 5 political signs in my yard during the political season, you're telling me that I have to come in and get a permit?
I'm telling you, if you came in and got a permit, you couldn't get all 5 on your property unless you put some on the inside of the windows, which are exempt. You could, because you only can have 1 freestanding sign, 2 ancillary signs, so that's only 3.
But couldn't the freestanding sign have multiple placards on it?
So we limit the sign. Yes. Because we limit the size, so if you
Right.
want to put multiple candidates on the one size.
But Laura, you say you're content neutral.
Yes.
Well, doesn't that apply to political signs as well?
So same standards apply. So we don't.
Well,
So
what
if I-
constitutes a political sign?
It doesn't matter to us. It's just the size that
Just the
we.
size.
Just the
So,
size.
so
that
I
we
could
put
have a
up.
freestanding sign advertising my
Signal
notary,
cannon.
my Avon dealership, and my I don't know, car dealer. It's massage
Your
therapy.
Herbalife.
Yeah, I mean, I could do that if I had it on a freestanding sign that was big enough to hold those three.
You just have to pay for a permit. So it's
Yeah.
how much you want to.
Well,
do them.
personally, I think we should exempt political signs during campaign season.
Yeah.
We did
I let any.
kick around the idea of allowing additional ancillary signs during during months of the year. And
No, I'm good with that. I
the-
guess
the
I just don't want to
recommendation
see
did pan out.
37 signs, because what you end up with is somebody puts 37 signs for the same candidate.
Yeah, because you can
Oh,
already
mine are all
get 4.
different.
I mean,
Well,
at least.
But
So every home could have 4 signs. So.
No, they have to be content neutral.
So,
So it doesn't
to
matter.
give,
I'm saying.
give-
That's why I don't
give you
want
an
30.
example. I had a sign for I don't think I had the president one up. So I had one for Metro. I had one for Congress. I had one maybe for governor. Then there was some local measure. Somebody put up one in my yard. I think I had about 5 in my yard. And as soon as the election was over, they were gone. They all had to come get them.
You're under arrest.
It's called Catch Me If You Can.
you just confessed.
I am confessing.
There is no
I'm
statute
saying
of
I have a
limitations
good
on
location, and
sign
people
code
come by and
violations.
put signs in my yard.
So after each of these sign codes, we summarized how we changed from the existing code. So we increased the number of signs because you can have a one freestanding sign for each property, and then also one wall sign for each frontage. We reduced the size of the sign sizes that are allowed.
That's
Our current
funny.
code allows 20 square feet, and now we're only allowing 12 square feet. Also, the length of the sign got reduced as well. We removed the height requirement. There was a height requirement for wall signs, which seems sort of funny because you couldn't. It was 5 feet, so you couldn't put it on your second story of a wall. And then we also had a maximum setback of 10 feet for signs that we took out as well. And then we're now allowing A-frame signs on private property, which we specifically prohibit right now. So signs under 6 square feet can be considered ancillary signs, whether they look like an A-frame or whether they look like a sign on a stick. Signs for multifamily, you can, 1 per frontage for wall plus freestanding, 2 ancillary signs, again, flags, A-frames, small signs, and then 1 right-of-way per frontage as well. Natural material standard applies. And then also, if it's illuminated, it's got to be external. No internally lit signs. That's in our current
So
code.
by this, I could have my maybe apartment complex sign on my wall. I could put one on the property that's a freestanding sign.
Yeah, most people have like the picture of where the apartments are or how to get to each building
And
or
then
something.
I could put a flag out.
Uh-huh. As an ancillary, because a flag counts. Mm-hmm. And then you can have 1 more.
I guess I feel this is just, it's too much. I mean, I'm not saying people are going to run out tomorrow and proliferate the place, but
Oh. Well, in this case, for instance, you'd have, say, Barkley Hills Apartments as your freestanding, and then you'd have Building 1, or Apartments A through Q, and then the next building would have Apartments whatever. And so those are signs that would be on the wall, and you'd have your general advertising. So, I mean, I can understand that. It just seemed that
it seems like
maximum of 3 seems a bit. So you could have 3 wall signs and 3 freestanding signs.
It's 1 per frontage.
So you're saying, saying apartments 1 through 5, you consider that To me, that's more like a directional sign.
So you get,
It's still
which
a
we
sign.
don't
Okay,
distinguish.
all right.
So you get one sign per frontage with the maximum of 3. So
Okay.
say you have 4 frontages, you only get 3.
So I could see for an
Okay.
apartments where I'm still having the brain cramp is a house. And I again use my house as an example. I'm having a hard time with that.
So with the number of signs for single-family homes,
Yeah, so let's keep moving.
do you want me to go back
Nope,
to that?
nope.
We're gonna come back.
Okay, and then, so here are the differences between our existing code and the proposed code. So maximum setback, height requirement for wall signs, and the length of signs were all changed. Again, we allow freestanding signs on private property where we don't today.
So let me ask you just a quick question about an A-frame sign. What about, let's say, in this vicinity, somebody puts a sign out at the corner that isn't on their property. Is that an off-premise sign?
So today,
In the right of way or on public on private property?
On the sidewalk.
Okay, so a right.
It's off-premise, it's not on their property.
so if it was on their property, we don't allow it because we don't allow A-frame signs on private property. And if it's not on their property, we don't allow it because it has to be signed by the city engineer in the public right-of-way, and they've never done that for a sign on the ground that we're aware
Okay.
of. So either way,
It's
not
not,
okay
so it's
today.
not allowed, okay.
Your question was, if I own, if I'm up the street on 7th and I want to put an A-frame out
Let's
in-
say
in the right of way.
on the corner right
in
here
front
by
of
City Hall. Yes.
Right?
Well, first off, it's not residential, so that's a different issue than we've gone to so far.
So in,
Yes.
under our right-of-way signs, if the person who owns the sign has a business license and that business license has a location, the sign has to be directly abutting that location.
Okay, so that's
So
what I
we're
was getting-
content neutral because it's
So what I was
whoever
asking
owns-
is that I would consider that if it's 6 blocks up on 7th and they want to put it down here on the corner of Center and 7th, that to me is an off-premise sign. It's nowhere near where they are.
So we
But
get
if,
to.
but if the budding business agrees to that, they can put up that sign, correct?
The owner of the sign, if the owner of the sign has a business license, the sign in the right-of-way has to be abutting
Okay,
the
cannot-
location of the business license.
But we don't regulate what that A-frame sign says.
But we can't regulate what it says, so we're not reading the sign to say, we're just saying we require owner's signature. We know who the owners are when they submit for a sign permit.
Okay,
if,
so you're-
if Denise's multifamily apartment, Denise's apartment, and you come to me and say, hey, I want to advertise an A-frame in front of Tony's Auto, and it's going to say Denise's apartment,
Right.
and you get me to agree to sign that, you could put an A-frame in front of my business that advertises your apartment.
Okay, so what I just
As
asked
long
was,
as you own the sign and she doesn't own the
Right.
sign. If she owns the sign and you sign as owner,
it's my
not
sign,
okay.
and I want to put it, again, off, I'm asking whether
Then it's not okay.
off-premise signs are allowed, A-frames, if it's not near anywhere where my business is.
So whoever owns the sign,
It's my sign.
then it has to be directly abutting the location for
So
your business
an
license.
off-premise sign like that would not be allowed, is what you're saying.
Unless you give it to
unless you
Tony, it's
convince
now Tony's
me
sign.
to come in and say it's my sign, and I'm paying for it, and it's in front of my business.
Even though it's advertising somebody else's business.
I can't look at
Well,
that.
again,
Yeah. Yes.
so I guess
So
the-
yes, that
'Cause we look
situation
at-
could happen.
Okay,
We
so
look at
the-
ownership.
So the bigger question is,
Mm-hmm.
are off-premise signs allowed? For
So
anything.
We're content neutral, so
So for anything?
Theoretically.
sure. Yeah, for wall signs, whatever it is, we're content neutral, so. it
So
could
if I
say
have,
anything.
my business is up by Eastham School and I want to advertise down on 99E and I don't own that property, I can put up a sign there?
No, you have to,
If you
A
get
freestanding sign, a wall sign, any sign?
No.
You have to have the property owner at that location put the sign up in your behalf.
For in the right of way. On private property, we also we require property owner's signature as well.
So can you have an off-premise sign on private property?
yes.
Why would we want to do that?
Because we can't.
How do
we're content
how do I
neutral.
regulate what the private property owner wants to put on their sign? If I can't regulate.
Well, if I'm advertising my business and I'm at 7th and John Adams and I want to put a sign down on 99E, that's nowhere near where my business is.
But,
But
it's the
what if
same.
you own the
It'd be
business
like you
on
lease.
the
It'd be like you
also?
leasing the space, right, from the property owner. And you talk the property owner into putting up a sign on their private property, and they meet all of our regulations for size and design, they can put whatever they want in that sign face.
Okay, all right, because we did not previously allow off-premise signs.
So we can't legally distinguish today between what a sign says and where it can go. But we can look at what the owner is and where the owner is located for signs in the right of way. That's what we did. But they could say whatever they want, and then also they can change the copy, and we don't require a permit, so it could change to something else too.
So in the world, do you
I see that
do
fraught
you
with some
administer
problems.
something like that? You're at the counter and somebody calls you up with a complaint, you know, that kind of stuff. How do you get a hold of the property owner? And did you apply for a sign permit, yada, yada?
Yeah,
Well,
so when
they
they
could look
apply
it
for
up.
the sign
It's
permit,
on-
we'll
on
Yeah, well,
probably
that's my
do-
point. Do they apply for a sign permit? A lot of, you got 90% of the people out there applying. You got 10%, you'll always deal with the 10% that don't get a rip about Oregon City Sign Code, and they go about their business. How do you control those? I'm not concerned about 90% that comply. It's the 10% that goes bonkers on you, on the
Fair.
city.
We want to have a good code enforcement.
Pardon me?
We'll have to
We're coming back to the.
do our
Code
best.
enforcement again, there you
I
go,
think- I
Charles.
think that is the
Yep.
superstructure of your entire ordinance, is how you apply it, how you control it, how you administer it. That is it, in a nutshell.
So then you brought up another point here about, you know, I have a bias against banners that stay up and then turn into rags. So again, why would we be wanting to allow banners in residential zones?
Okay, so this is
Other
for-
than the ones that go over the street that have to be approved by the city because of the structural, that, you know, if that is advertising a community-wide event, I get that.
So for signs on private property, which is listed here, you'll see or banners under the ancillary signs. This was a recommendation from our community advisory team. So it's only for conditional uses in residential zones. It's not for single family or two family or multifamily in
So
residential
my
zones.
banners on my house are out.
Banners on your house are out, but the banners
On the auto shop.
on a church or a school saying event coming up can happen. You do need a permit for it, and you can only have a banner twice a year for up to 30 days per time. So you can't be a continuous banner.
Okay, so you are going to make me very happy. So does this mean that all those crappy looking banners on the fence at Eastham School can go down? Because they're-
yes, we don't allow signs on fences, and we don't allow banners either.
Okay,
And yeah, so they wouldn't
What
be
about
allowed now.
roads?
And
they
they're not allowed
stay up
later.
literally till they fall apart, then they put a new, I mean, and it keeps changing all the time. There's tons of them, and it just makes the place look shoddy.
Because we require a permit for the banners, then we know when the 30 days is up. So it will have definite timelines on the approval.
And how many can they have?
Just
Two.
one.
They can have two.
Because I know
Yeah,
there's
well-
4 up there now.
So you can have, you can only have for 30 days twice per year for a banner on your property. So I suppose if you want to do 2 banners at the same time, then you're 30 days and then you're done for the year.
But here's the catch. So now then they're going to put out the jazzercise A-frame and the whatever it is A-frame and the wide. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 things being advertised on there. And so now am I going to see 4 or 5 different A-frames sitting on the sidewalk that's advertising jazzercise?
So for conditional uses, a lot of the standards are the same as they are today. So you can have your wall sign, your freestanding sign, the 2 ancillary signs, which a banner would count for that. Also, so we have the wall signage allowed. The banner has to be included within the wall signs allowed. So if you've already have your maximum wall sign, you can't have a banner because the size of the banner, though we have size limitations, it also
So
has to be
go back to
included.
your previous slide. You noted banner, wall size. I assume you mean the wall size sign.
Yeah, the 32 square feet
Okay.
is the maximum size for wall signs.
In other words, it's not allowed to be a banner the size of the wall. It's the size of a wall sign.
So it has to fit within the 32 square feet total. So you only get 32 total. You can have 1 per frontage. So if your size of your sign is 30 square feet, then your banner can only be 2 square feet.
So I assume the code language will be clear about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will make sure.
And then I guess I'm going to double back on some stuff with this. First off, so a welcome home sign draped from 2 second-story windows on a residential house is not allowed?
A banner? Is that right? It is?
Yeah.
No, it's not allowed.
You don't get
Banners aren't
welcome
allowed
banner.
currently in our sign code anywhere today.
Okay.
So we are opening up something to allow something that they aren't allowed today.
What about it's a twin, or they're twins, or it's a boy?
Any
Content
banner.
neutral.
So if you want to have,
It's
if
a
you want to
neuter.
have a wall
Content,
sign,
right, it can
it's
say whatever
fine.
you
If you
want.
want to put it on
Okay.
the inside of the windows, it doesn't count. Or if you want to have a freestanding sign that says the same message, whatever it is, then it's okay.
So what's the definition of a banner?
Um,
I know it's in.
do you want me to
here,
read?
but- Because
It's
at
a
what
sign
point?
made of fabric, vinyl, or other similar non-rigid material.
So you can't use your sheet, the bed sheet. That'd be a banner.
But what if I nailed it to the side of the house? Would it then be a wall sign?
No.
But it's made from a natural material. It's cotton.
Cotton, there you go.
Yeah, no. So we no.
No, that's
because
fine. No
under
is
our-
a good answer. I'm okay with that. I just
No, we wrote our code so that specifically it does not. Can't
Okay.
count.
And the reality of it being, if it's a welcome home sign on a couple of sheets and it's up for 5 hours and gone, code compliance couldn't get there in time anyway, and nobody really cares. But
So, no, they don't.
the other side of it goes back to the whole out of bounds signs. Would I, as a multiple location owner in the city, be able to put signs advertising businesses that aren't adjacent? So I can put in front of my business on 99 a sign saying, "Come to my eatery on 5th and Jackson,"
Yes.
because it's mine.
Yes.
Okay.
We only get into the ownership thing for
Right.
signs in the right of way. If it's not even on the right of way,
Well, that's
then
what I'm
it doesn't
saying.
even
It's on the
matter.
right of way. It's my
Yep.
A-frame. It's
Yep.
But it still
Um,
comes out of your total allowance of signs that you're allowed to have on that property, so you can't double
Mm-hmm.
dip.
right. But
If you don't want to advertise for your existing business on 99,
Well, maybe
you'd rather
already am.
advertise for your one on 7th, you can do that.
Or
as
if
long
you
as
want
go
a
through the process.
Political candidate
well,
sign.
it's rotating A-frame sign or whatever.
Mhm.
So
That I-
okay,
Yep,
that I
you can
wanna
do that.
see.
it's a rotating A-frame.
Yep, you just put it on the thing and make it.
Yeah. Except they can't. They can't have moving signs. Remember?
What about the lady on 99 that's holding the mattress sign that's still?
Yeah, she's off limits.
She's holding it then, yeah.
But what if she came to Oregon City?
Oh, you mean the fake mannequin?
Yes, the
Yeah.
fake
That counts as a sign. If it was a real person, it doesn't count. That
No,
one
she's
counts.
definitely fake.
That would be a freestanding sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get the biggest chuckle out of that because they don't
Gets you
change.
every time.
They don't change her
No.
outfit. She's wearing the same thing. She's starting to look faded.
It's always summer.
So for signs, we heard a lot of discussion that our height requirement was too small, so we made it taller for 8 to 15 feet for conditional uses in residential zones.
Really?
Yes, and that was off a few
Yeah,
requests
because-
from sign companies and from we had someone from a church on our community advisory team as
Because
well.
all you need is a pickup truck with a camper on it, and that 8-foot sign's invisible.
You know what that is too, is this is a little bit of a holdover in that almost all of our religious institutions and educational facilities are on residential property.
Absolutely. Because they were
they're-
conditional use.
they're
A lot of them are
conditional
closer to
uses.
15.
Well, a lot of them weren't in residential areas, and then the residential areas grew up around them. Look at
Right,
the old
I mean-
Mount Pleasant. It was in the middle of a field.
And so we've run into several instances of where we're coming to planning commission for variances for the high school or for, XYZ religious institution that wanted to put up a sign that was level and 8 foot.
Yeah, I will be honest with you. I had someone call me, the one that's on Holcomb. It's lighted. It's a church. I got asked the question about how that got to be a lighted sign, and I said, I can tell you that we did not issue a sign permit for that, for a lighted sign, because it's in a residential zone, and it's a
Allowed to
church.
be internally lit.
It's a illuminated box sign. Because I happened to talk to the pastor one time. He says, "I've been meaning to call you." I said,
It was on the cab.
"Huh?"
He was, what was his name? He was on the cab.
Yeah, he sat on our committee, and actually, I thought I looked up their sign permit and I found an assigned approved copy of their sign permit.
Yeah. So anyway, I
Um,
said, I don't know.
I don't know, but I know that I found an approved sign permit for that, for a freestanding sign on it.
And it may have been
I don't know if
approved. It may
I
have
didn't
been
look at it that well.
approved because see, that was the area that was annexed. That church has been there for a really long time. I don't think we did it, but I think it was there prior to annexation, and the county could have issued a sign permit for it. But I said
Yes.
it wasn't us.
So, wall signs, you get an unlimited amount of wall
So now
signs.
you're
We're moving out
You're
of
into
Commercial,
commercial.
okay.
Now you're in commercial.
So we're in commercial, and so we're going to break out each of those commercial because we allow so many different types of sign by each one rather than group them all in one slide. So for wall signs, you get, for every lineal foot of tenant space, you'll get 1 square foot of signage. You can have one big sign, lots of little signs. We don't regulate the number of signs, just the total size of signs.
Which is
One linear.
Which 1 to 1. There is a minimum.
So if it's a 20-foot frontage, you get a 20 square foot sign.
Yes, and if you have a 15-foot frontage, you're guaranteed a minimum of a 20-foot square foot sign. So there is a base minimum. That was recommended from our CAD as well.
Except the way this reads is each ground floor tenant. So conceivably, I could have 2 ground floor tenants that are guaranteed 20 feet, but I've only got 25 feet of frontage.
Yep.
So how do I get them to 20-foot signs?
Well, I mean, they have to, if they fit on the building, then you can do it. Then we would issue a sign permit for it.
So
Is
it
that
would
really
be
what we
different
want?
than the.
So our current code allows for every lineal foot of building,
Mhm.
not tenant space, but building space, you get 2 square foot of wall sign. So you actually get, the proposed code would be half the amount of wall sign, but we're distinguishing tenant space. So now, under our current code, if I was a tenant, I could take up all the square footage for signage if I wanted to and leave you 0. You know, as a building owner, you would sort of regulate that between your tenants.
well, I would think so.
But, so now we're looking at just tenant space and not building, which is a lot easier to administer as well, because if you're applying for a sign permit on like a shopping center, you'd have to figure out the size of every sign for every other tenant in that shopping center.
I'm confused.
I am too.
Go with,
Sorry.
you have a 20-foot frontage. And so that would be, under this, I'd have 20 square foot of sign space.
Yes.
I have 4 ground floor tenants, which says each ground floor tenant has a minimum of 20 feet. That means that'd be 80 square feet of sign on my 20-foot long building.
That's not.
But you could go up. I mean, you could
That's
go
not what
taller.
you mean, though.
That is exactly what I mean. Each tenant is guaranteed 20 square feet as a minimum.
Okay, is that
As a minimum, as the base.
Okay,
So
so-
it's 1 for every square foot of tenant, for every lineal foot of tenant space, you get 1 square foot of signage. If you're under 20 feet of frontage space, you still get a 20 square foot sign. So it's just the minimum.
so? Are we doing this? Are we doing it by tenants or are we doing it by the building?
Tenant.
Okay, well, what if I have a 20 square foot front and I'm the only, and that's just one occupant?
Then you get a 20 square foot sign.
So why would you do the wall sign and then each of the tenants gets a separate allotment as well?
No,
No.
you're not getting 2 signs, you get 1 sign per tenant.
So you could have as many signs as you want per tenant, but each tenant gets 1 square foot of signage for each foot
You get
of
20.
tenant
the-
space.
Okay,
That's
you're saying you can get as
contradictory.
many signs as you want, but you only get this.
You only get a certain square
What she's
footage.
saying is you get at least 20
20 square feet as a baseline.
Yeah.
And if you have more than 20 lineal feet of tenant space, then you get more signage. So if you had 25 lineal feet of tenant space, you get 25 square feet of signage.
5x5 sign.
Right. And if you want one 25 square foot sign, you can have it. Or if you want one 20 square foot sign and one 5 square foot sign for a total of 2 signs.
But the
you can have
20
two.
foot is your baseline.
But you still only get 25 square feet of signage. And yes, the baseline is still.
Okay, well, that's
They're-
different from what I heard you answering Damon.
Yeah, it's,
That's where I'm getting
I'm sorry,
confused.
so I was explaining, so the difference between our current code is different.
Well-
The proposed code
You
is.
do your example again, because what you
Okay, I've
said
got-
made sense to me.
I got it. I got 20 feet of space.
Uh-huh.
I have 2 tenants.
So you have 20 feet of building
Each
frontage.
have 10 feet of frontage.
Not well.
So you
We
have
can have 1 and 19.
Okay.
Because the guy's got a door that leads to a hallway that
Well,
goes to.
from a
It doesn't care.
practical-
Yeah, we
it's
specify
irrelevant.
common
It's
space.
2 tenants.
Okay, you have
Uh-huh.
2 tenants and 20 square feet of frontage. a
According to
building wall.
this, they each get 20 feet.
Yes, because 20 feet is our minimum.
20 square feet of sign.
Uh-huh.
Then why do we have the 1 linear foot requirement?
Because after you have.
Above and beyond that.
For a really
A-
big.
After you have more than 20 feet of lineal footage, then that's where the 1 foot per lineal foot kicks in.
So if you have 50 feet of,
So if I, but
Doesn't
that's
make
what
any
I'm
sense
saying.
to me.
It-
It's not computing, sorry.
I mean,
it's just a minimum. So no matter how small your tenant space is, you get a guaranteed minimum.
My only question is, have we
So is that
defined
10 feet
tenant
by 10
well?
feet?
Yes, we.
What was that?
Have we defined tenant well?
I think we have. We've gone through differentiating between common space and things like that as well, like entryways.
Tenant space means the portion of a structure occupied by a single commercial leaseholder or an owner-occupied space with its own public entrance from the exterior of the building or through a shared lobby, atrium, mall, or hallway and separated from other tenant spaces by a wall.
Okay, was there a problem that we were trying to fix? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Were we having a situation where I have my building is 20 feet wide, I have 2 tenants, and both tenants want signage, and so I divide it equally between the 2 of them so they each have tenant signs. And then let's say somebody subleases and wants a 3rd sign, and I say no because I've already got my 2 signs here for my minimum.
It was a request from our community advisory team to have a minimum. Guaranteed, regardless of
And
your
I'm
wall
asking,
size.
what was the problem we were trying to solve? Or are there people out there saying, I'm a tenant and my building owner won't give me any signage? I'm just not saying that there was some issue.
So right now, we allow wall signs to be larger than 1 foot
Okay.
for each. So we halved the amount that they could be. And part of that was to say that for small tenant space, you at least get a guaranteed minimum. So
So what was wrong with the other part, the way it was? Yeah, I didn't write it, I'm just saying,
So
what
there
was,
is a couple of problems. One is, this might be confusing. So we did look at building wall, not tenant
Right.
space, and that was problematic for us to administer, and it was problematic for applicants as well, because some people could end up with 0 if other tenants took all the signage. And then also, when you submitted for a sign permit, you had to figure out what the size of everybody else's sign was, which was always difficult.
So this is
well,
exactly.
you put the burden of proof
So-
on the person requesting
We
the
did,
permit.
and that's
Well,
what they
this
did.
is to prevent what you were talking about, where somebody takes up all of the signage allotment and there's none left for you. So.
But as a building owner,
By
I would think
giving
that
it-
there'd be something, if they were a reasonable building
Well,
owner.
Now you're making an
I
assumption.
know, so I'm saying that there would be sign
What
allotment.
this does is it establishes a minimum standard for each tenant so that one tenant can't gobble up all the signage
and leave none for anybody else.
I think it makes it easier for the city and easier for the applicants because they know what they have to work with. Before, they didn't really know what they had to work with because they didn't know how much signage was on the
I
building.
mean, the way this slide
It's
is
just it's worded
is
weirdly, I think.
makes it contradictory. The flip side is 20 square feet is nothing. It's a 4x5, which is like 1/3 of a standard plate glass window.
That's big,
But
though.
but the two paragraphs compete with each other. So it should say each ground floor tenant may have a minimum of 20 square feet, and then say signage in excess of this shall be allowed at 1 square foot per lineal foot, something like that, so that you know that you're starting at 20, whether you got 5 feet or 19 feet or 20 feet, you got 20. So if you have two tenants in a 50-foot building, each can have 25. But one guy may do 30, one might do 20. That's your fight. But it's this because
Yeah, I
right
see-
now
I see
you
what
read
you're
this
saying.
and you have a 19-foot building with two tenants. You're going to end up with 40 square feet of sign. But that's not what the first paragraph says. The first paragraph says you can only have 19 square feet of sign. So I'm walking down the street and I go, that's about 18 feet. There's like 90 feet of signs. How can that be? I'm going to call code compliance.
So you think if we switched that order and said each ground floor tenant is entitled to a minimum of 20 square
That makes
feet.
more sense to me, because to me, this looked like it would, well, maybe it is cumulative. To me, it looks like you have two tenants, you get 40 square feet divided by two people, if you have two tenants, right?
Depending
I mean, it's
on the
basically
width
your
of their
tenant
tenant space. Yes.
You told me it didn't matter what the width of their tenant space was, they get a minimum of 20 square feet.
Correct.
Now, obviously, if a 20 square foot sign is too big for the tenant space width, is common sense going to prevail here? Or they're going to try to cram a 20 square foot sign on the front of their,
They're going to lease it to the other guy.
oh, that's right, so
Yeah.
I can have my,
Yeah.
my apartment sign there.
Right.
There you go, all right.
I will make sure that we clarify
So
that.
then you're saying that in addition to the one tenant with 20 square feet, in addition to that, if I have a 20 square foot, 20 linear feet of wall, then I can have 1 square foot in addition.
No.
No.
So we need to clarify that at some point it says, okay, you get a minimum 20 square feet.
Right.
And then
And
we need to clarify that
beyond the 20
in
feet.
excess, if your frontage, if your ground floor tenant space is less than 20 feet, you get a minimum of 20 square feet of signage. If your ground floor frontage is in excess of 20 feet, you get 1 linear foot for.
Yeah. That's yeah. And
So
That-
it's not cumulative.
Okay,
No.
'cause
so
it-
we need to clarify.
Okay, it looked like it was, that's what you were asking. If you had these two signs, then if I had this big, then it would be 80 square feet, and then it would be like, that's what I understood you to say.
right.
But-
Okay, all
but
right.
If I had a building that's 20 feet
Wide,
wide,
yeah.
and I have 4 tenants
Right.
in there, right? Each one of those tenants, and so let's just say for easy math, they're, even though this isn't realistic, 5 foot wide.
Mm-hmm.
You would have 80 square feet of signage allowed on that building.
Yeah, that's a lot. Unfortunately, it probably
It's very,
wouldn't,
very hard to.
it
think
wouldn't
that's
look good, though.
Well, but I could see how that would work in that you could have doors on like the outer edge leading to separate hallways that lead to 2 offices in the back. So you have 2 in the back and 2 in the front, but those 2 doors are frontage, therefore they're allowed a sign.
Right. Tony's attorney
Yeah.
in the back corner of.
Tony's
Nick's
bookmaking.
Notary Republic or whatever. Question, yes.
We can't. Do you want to come up? We can hear you.
Come on up, Jonathan.
I want to get you on the record.
You don't want to get killed by Brene in the back, yeah.
I know I should know the answer, but my question is having to do with entrances for second floor or third floor tenants.
It's
Only ground floor.
only.
Okay, so
State your name for the record.
oh, Jonathan Stone.
That's good.
Okay. So I don't recall off the top of my head, and so I just wasn't sure if that
Yeah,
was.
no, it's just ground floor. It'd be
The 20 minimum ground floor.
Yeah.
Right.
Guaranteed.
If you're
Sure,
on the
but
third
what
floor-
about the 8 foot wide lobby with the door to the stairs that go upstairs? Is that 8 foot wide lobby allowed? 8
That's not-
square feet or 20 square feet of signage?
That's not, doesn't
The
sound to me like
lobby's
that's
not
a
a
ground,
tenant.
it's not included,
It's
it's not a.
common area, so it's not tenant space.
So
What-
they could put their name on the door on the inside.
What about, I mean, I'm thinking of a number of buildings downtown that have exterior tenant signage saying Unit 8, Unit 7, whatever, you know, sort of upstairs.
Inside the front door.
No, they're like, it's the 3x5 sign with 7 placards, shingles hanging there saying, attorney this went room 4, chiropractor in room 9, whatever. There's 3 or 4 of them down there that are like that.
I think this gets into a little bit of, at some point, there has to be some responsibility for the building owner in how they advertise their building. It'd be, you know, let's just say it's a.
I know which one you're talking about, it's the little narrow ones, and it's one big sign, but it's got lots of different names on it.
Yeah.
That would be their sign. They wouldn't get 20 square feet for each of them, the ones upstairs.
No, I'm not suggesting that each business upstairs would get 20 square feet, unless you were looking at, does the building have a giant sign on the side somewhere that can be seen from a highway? But
No.
but that, I guess this discussion right now, it seems to be precluding the entrance to a lobby for many tenants upstairs.
So our definition of tenant space means the portion of a structure occupied by a single commercial leaseholder or an owner-occupied space with its own public entrance from the exterior of a building or through a shared lobby, atrium, mall, or hallway and separated from other tenant spaces by walls. So it does include the shared space.
So effectively, the lobby is a tenant of sorts.
So would that, so what you're saying is you want to know whether the 20 square foot minimum for the tenant would apply to that if they're not on the ground floor?
It applies to the lobby.
On the ground floor.
Right.
Does it apply to the lobby on the
Yeah,
ground
so
floor?
if you have tenant A, then a lobby associated with upstairs, then tenant B, then it's 20, 20, 20.
Even though there might be 6 tenants upstairs?
Correct.
They all share the 20.
They have
It's one lobby.
One lobby.
So they get, the 6 of them would have to share a 20 square foot sign.
But then they also get signage for the other stories. I mean, you get 1 foot of signage for each tenant space above on the upper floors too. I mean, so the second story, say it's owned by one entity, that person, for their tenant space, they get 1 foot of signage for every foot of tenant space on the second story, then the
That
third
doesn't
story.
say that. It says,
Ground floor tenant.
The ground floor tenant's the minimum 20. There's no minimum for the upper stories. It's just the ground floor has a minimum.
I think we need to put this one in the parking lot, because I thought I had it, and then Jonathan asked the question, and now I don't have it.
I will, we'll come up with some pictures with examples too, so we can clarify tenant space and lobby.
Thank
And
you
by
for
the
the
way, I
question.
think the signage downtown is looking really good, and I hope that this doesn't cause it to go back to the way it used to be.
Okay. So projecting signs is our next sign type. So that's anything that sticks out more than a foot from the wall. So we talked about the size that you are allowed for wall signs. The size of the projecting sign is also included in that. So we tied the two together. So if you have a really big wall sign, you can't have a really big projecting sign. If you have not very much wall signage, you can still have a larger projecting sign if you want to. There's clearance standards, which we have in our current code. There's a new standard that says the supporting structure must be constructed of
Those natural materials.
brick, metal, stone. I'm not going to say natural materials. And then
Yeah,
our
'cause I'd want it to be metal.
I would want it to be metal.
I don't want it to be a wooden 4x4 that in 5 years rots off and drops it on me.
We've had some of those in town
you
before.
need building permit. I mean, if it's
Why
over
don't you just
30
say that the
pounds.
supporting structure must be constructed of metal?
And then we don't want it sticking
Might wanna
above
do
the
stone.
building too high.
I don't think
so
you
it can
could
only
get a
be
stone
be foot
sticking out of the
above.
side of your building.
Um,
No way.
And we don't want you more than 2 feet within the curb line, which is what our current code is as well. Because we want to make sure that some of those big trucks that are driving on the road have a little bit of clearance.
So they can't hang over the sidewalk and be out in the street?
Correct.
Go back to that.
Yes.
Within, what keeps it from
Even
hanging over
more.
the sidewalk?
They can't be within 2 feet of the curb line.
Okay, so you got a 5-foot curb, sidewalk.
Yeah, so it depends where your building is placed. So your building, your sign can project a maximum of 6 feet. Right now it's 4. So if your building is back far enough that you can project 6 feet
Okay, so
and then
then-
have at least 2 feet
Okay,
from the curb.
then you kick in 10 feet clearance above the pedestrian, so I
So that's
don't,
height.
Mhm.
so I don't bang my head. Okay.
Yep,
All right.
exactly.
Thank you.
So if you have a standard 5-foot curb, the most you can have is a 3-foot sign.
If your building is on the property
Yeah.
line. Exactly. So freestanding signs, we did not make any recommendations to change the square footage, except for we didn't have clarifications on if you were exactly 200
These are good.
feet of frontage, so we clarified that. One thing that is new is that if you have a very large frontage, you can have a second freestanding sign. I have a map of what that means here, so it's very hard to read, but the point is that there are not that very many properties in the city that have frontages of 600 feet or more on arterials. So if you have frontage of 600 feet or more on arterials, you can have a second freestanding sign on that same frontage. This was to address some concerns that were addressed from specifically the college, but properties with really large frontages that could only have one freestanding sign. So you can,
Could you stop for a second?
yeah.
This was a concern by the colleges?
Clackamas Community College was concerned that they only get one sign, but yet they have a ton of frontage, because we only allow one per frontage.
Well, they have one on Beaver Creek and they have one on Malala
They have 2 on
They-
Beaver Creek.
Yes.
at
but they
each of the
haven't-
entrances.
But they have a lot of frontage on, for example, Malala or 213.
And they want more?
More than one. Mhm.
Well-
Why?
Well, for instance, if Myers Road goes through, then they would want one on
It's only-
Moala.
It's
near
only on
Myers Road.
arterials that we're talking about. For
I
the sign.
understand, but if Myers Road goes through, then they could put one near Myers on Moala,
Uh-huh.
so that when people go down Myers and come in the side of Clackamas Community College.
Like a second entranceway.
But that's not what she's
Uh-huh.
saying. She's saying
Yeah.
they want more signs. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with
I don't
what
have-
if the other.
I don't
road
have
goes
any
in.
problem with
In
them.
their master plan, they do have a second road
Mhm.
coming in. Off.
I don't have any problem with them having signs on their entrances, but that's why I was asking, because it sounded like what you said, that they want all these signs, and I'm thinking, really? No, doesn't sound good.
So also when we had our community advisory team, it was made clear that the amount of signage or the size of signage should be dependent on your frontage.
But they're kind of an exception. Other people don't have that same situation.
Yeah,
Well,
so
the
everything in
county
yellow,
does. They've
or I
got
mean,
all those
pink.
signs saying Building A, Building B, Building C, police, jail, whatever. They've got like 37 freestanding signs that are necessary. I need to know where I'm going to go pay my taxes.
Oregon
you
City
better.
Shopping Center also, so those people, both the college as well as Oregon City Shopping Center, came to the community advisory teams and expressed their opinion. So you'll see the square on this one right here is Oregon City Shopping Center. And then we have
Where?
Here,
right here, oh, it's on mine.
it's the top.
Yeah, you're it's not letting you do it.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
It was on mine, sorry.
Shopping center.
So Oregon
This
City
is
Shopping Center,
Depot
landfill,
and
this is the county shops, this is Home Depot, this is Metro. This is a really odd piece that has no building on it.
Which piece?
This one is on the side of 99.
What is it?
Looks like Union Pacific.
It's
UP
Union
line.
Pacific. It's the railroad line.
And they need a sign?
Nope, these are just all the
We
properties
just
with
grabbed,
Oh.
we just grabbed.
600 feet of frontage that aren't city owned.
Go by train.
Or I'm sorry, that are not parks. This is the PGE property. This is Clackamas County. It's all one tax lot. This is the red soils, with
Yeah, it's red soils. Just leave it there.
the
Okay.
one. And then this is Bimart.
And the
Goodwill.
problem we are trying to solve,
So, we
Is-
only have a few properties with large frontages. We heard a concern that properties with large frontages have a need for a second freestanding sign. So we added a code language that allows them a second freestanding sign.
Does it allow them more freestanding sign square footage, or?
No, they don't get a bigger one. So right now, the size of the freestanding sign is based on what your frontage is. So if you have 2 or more frontage, you get 150 feet per sign face, so front and back. So you still have that same standard whether you're 201 feet of frontage or
Yeah.
12,000 feet of frontage.
okay, so let's,
And I don't have a problem with that because it's not
well, let's use my favorite example, the Oregon City Shopping Center,
Okay.
who has a very large multi-tenant sign that is already out of compliance. It's pre-existing non-conforming, and as long as they don't change it, other than the faces, they can keep that sign. So, not to pick on them, I'm not picking on them, I'm just saying that's my big example since I'm there like 8,000 times a day.
Those
So-
signs are working.
It's not, no, I have to take someone to work. That's where I'm there. I'm not there to
It's
shop.
Starbucks,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's Starbucks, yes. Yeah. So, we are saying that because they have an extended frontage, that we, in our wisdom, they should be granted an additional freestanding sign?
Not
So
to
they
exceed
get
their
a
total
total of
space.
2. So they have more than 2 now. So they would, if they came in for a building permit for another sign, we would say no.
Yeah, but if they came in with
But
a
yeah.
master plan that said, we're tearing down all of our freestanding signs, getting
we
rid
wanna
of
start
all
all
those,
over.
and we want to have one right there when you get off at 205, and one at the other end right when you come across the Gladstone Bridge, they could do it, as long as it was within the X amount of
Well,
square
they
feet.
can't because the
Yeah.
one on 205, ODOT already told them no, so they're done with that. But
Well, I'm saying like we're
We're
sharing.
starting over. If it's a vacant piece with over,
Yeah.
Yep.
with 200
They're
linear
like-
feet or more, they would get another
They're at
proposal.
601. They're like right at the cusp of what
Well,
600 is.
And I don't have a problem with that because they're not getting more signage, they're just getting
Right.
more locations, and that's, when you got a
But
large
they are
frontage.
getting more signage.
No, the square footage stays the same.
No,
They just-
no.
Yeah, we didn't touch the square footage standards.
So
they,
they-
now
they could have
So-
2 signs of 150 square feet per sign face.
If they had no signs right now.
If we started over,
Right.
if you're blank property,
If
you've
you're
got
blank-
601 feet of
Right.
frontage, you could have.
They could
the
have
way
2
it's written, you could have
freestanding signs.
2 freestanding signs
On the same frontage.
of the same size. Yeah.
Or less. I mean, it's up to
Or they could have a 500 square foot sign saying, these are all the businesses here, and then, these are all the businesses here, and then a 100 square foot sign that says entrance.
To the maximum, biggest it could be is 150 square feet per sign face.
Well,
There's a directional.
I'm just saying the
But yeah, they
600
can-
because it's 2.
We'll get to the ancillary signs, those ones less than 6
But you
square
can't,
That are
you
directional.
can't combine the square footage. It's per sign face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Each-
two-sided.
Each sign would be treated as individual signs,
Okay.
so they could get one sign of 150 square feet per sign face, and then a second sign of 150. It could be the same size.
Okay, here's the
So
question
you're
I
not,
have for
you're
you.
not saying 100 square feet
No.
total with 50 each side.
We're saying 300 total. 50
300
each side.
square feet, 150 each
Per
side.
sign, now 2
If
of them
it's-
instead of just one. If you have over 600 linear feet, so that's the question for you.
Happy with that?
All I'm concerned about is whether it functions for the public. It's a two-edged sword, one for the property owner, one for the public. In terms of, when I look at a sign, is it directional? Is it advertising the occupants of the premises? I'm looking for information too. So which way does it favor?
Yeah, I guess I'm with you. More is not necessarily better. And obviously there are a number of sign companies whom I will not name, but they know who they are, who design very nice signs. And they serve their purpose. They're attractive. They give you information, but they're not like beating you over the head. And we all know what signs those are. So I guess my philosophy is less is more. Because I've been in other communities. A place that I thought would never get their act together with a sign code is where my brother and sister live in San Jose. And I was astounded the last few times I've been down there. There are, whatever they have for their compliance and enforcement, most of those big giant Herkin signs, they are gone. They are ground signs. They have a maximum size. They still convey all the information. They're at eye level. The big giant ones up in the air, they're gone, even off of freeways. And there are a number of communities. I'd say an extreme is Santa Barbara. They have a very strict sign code because they have something they are trying to. They have an image that they're trying to project. Santa Barbara is a very nice looking community, and I think their signage is a testament to what they want to try to accomplish. And I guess, not to put Zach on the spot, but I mean, part of what I think it should do is, again, what is it we want our community to look like? I think that's the big overriding concern. If we're trying to project this certain image about what our community looks like, then that needs to be conveyed. If that's not what we're doing and we're just trying to get, more signs everywhere, then that's a whole nother philosophy and that's a whole nother process.
Well, Denise, what you're doing, what you're suggesting, and I agree with you, but we've got to look this in the face and admit as to what we're trying to do is control the aesthetics of a sign with size standards, because we don't have an architectural review committee for signs that would do what we're suggesting, how it looks. It all boils down to how it looks. And we don't have the tools for that.
Nope.
We're trying to control how a sign looks by its size, by controlling its size.
Time, place, manner, material.
And that's all we can do by law.
Laura's going to put a language in there that the signs all have to look good.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. So if we don't come to grips with this and admit that that's what we're trying to do, is control the looks of these signs just by their size, and that's not a very good control. I mean, the problem's going that way and our solution's going that way. So how do we control how a sign looks when we don't have the tools to do it? Silence.
It's a hard one. I'm trying not to pick on the Oregon City Shopping Center. So let's say Berry Hill. I'm trying to think in my brain how many. They have different pads, so
They're not on the map.
No, because they have private ownership as part of their shopping center. They do have one big sign that says Berry Hill Shopping Center, and I can't remember. I think it's on Molalla, but I don't think the other ones are on Beaver Creek, because each of those tenants has their own pad. So it's a different situation. At Oregon City Shopping Center, the whole thing is one entity. It's not different pads owned by different ownerships.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that they're sort of between a rock and a hard place, because I know some of the leases with some of the tenants require that they be on that freestanding sign, and that's a private agreement that they have, and that's why they're a little bit in the rock and the hard place. But I'm a little hard pressed unless they came into compliance of them having more signage. I just, I
Can't
don't,
until they come into compliance.
Oh, okay.
So it's,
Until they drop back into compliance, they can't have more signs. So, and if this encourages them
To come into compliance.
to get rid of the monolith, because one of the downsides is if they don't have what they believe is the ability to re-sign attractively, then they're going to keep fixing the monolith.
yeah, and that's what they've been doing for the last
And-
25 years.
That's not necessarily what we want. I mean, I'm okay with it, but there's some businesses that don't have recognizable logos, and it takes a while to read that sign going by. So,
Well, I think what we've got to do as a commission is to solve this problem. Do we care how a sign looks, other than its size? Because we keep getting undercurrents here, and we haven't come to grips with this.
Well, it's a bigger issue. I mean, as I was saying, and I wasn't being facetious, that I think Main Street has done a very good job of trying to provide an overall image that they want to project, and the signage that is there now is projecting that image. It's clean, it's easily readable, it's not stuff all over the place like it used to be about 20 years ago. And I think that ethos could be applied to the rest of the city. But again, that's what makes Main Street unique, and it's projecting that image. And I think that's good for the community, and I think people are recognizing that. It's trying to figure out how to project that, because what I've noticed now at the Safeway Center, it's starting to creep. Down on the corner of Beaver Creek, all of a sudden there's a sign for this thing, and then there's a sign for that thing, and then there's a flag sign, and then there's a feather sign, and and then there's the advertising sign that says we have space for lease, and all of these people are starting to, it's starting to get junkified. I mean, It really is not looking good, and that's the newest shopping center we have, and it's starting to go by the way of not projecting that nice, ooh, we're brand new, we're clean image, because everybody's got to put something out. And
Is there a way that, I'm particularly concerned about Molal Avenue and 7th, and I agree with Denise, things are starting to creep. And as they creep, the ambiance changes, and it starts to get looking junky. Here I am, using the word look. We're getting back into how it looks. Is there a way that we could apply a strip zone all up Mole Island to control signs other than just frontage and placement? Just to be a special zone applied to the control of signs.
We can do, in our community advisory team originally played around with the idea of how are locations in the city different, and should they have different sign requirements for different locations in the city. And they decided that the requirements should be based off frontage, which would themselves
Equalize
size
it.
it out. So you can say 7th and Malala has a special district, but again, you have to be content neutral. So you could say those places could have less or more signs or whatnot. But a lot of signs that are up now may not be legal. So if we actually enforce our code, I think that addresses a majority of the concerns out there.
Are we looking at applying these regulations retroactively to signs that are already in place, or those
I don't
signs?
see it in there.
Yeah, so we have a
grandfathered?
non-conforming section. So our code now, when it was adopted in, I think it was 1993, said all your signs must comply in 10 years. So by 2003, all non-conforming signs must go away. But the city never enforced that. So right now we have a lot of signs that don't meet our sign code today. Our new sign
Some of them
code
are
says
falling
if
down.
it was legal when it was initially constructed, it can remain until the owner removes it. If it was not legal, then it's still not legal. So.
Well, I appreciate what Bob's saying and Denise, and I like the technical term junkification. I think that's very good. but the only way I think you're going to get around the just free-for-all is to have a signage design review.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's no other way, because as Bob was saying, you're controlling the height, that you're controlling the size and the location and all those things, but you don't address probably the most important thing is, does the sign look good? And that's one reason I'm talking about a maintenance standard, so that at least if it's maybe not the best looking sign in the world to begin with, it doesn't turn into a dilapidated thing that is falling apart. But if you wanted to address the appearance of the sign, the only way I can see to get to that point is to have some sort of a signage design review process. And
And
the
we would
problem
still
with
have
that
to be
is
content
it's,
neutral.
well,
Yeah.
true,
It
but
could
I mean,
be.
Get into material.
then
Yeah.
you can address at least how the signs are built, and do they look nice?
Well, I mean, for example, I think that the idea of having, because the 7th Street corridor functions in a different way than the Hilltop does. And it would seem to me that the standards for those are different anyway, because part of the 7th Street corridor is in the McLaughlin Conservation District, and there is an additional overlay for signage in that corridor. And I know that there are a number of signs that are, they weren't in compliance then, and they're not in compliance now. So,
So yeah, designated properties and.
well, no, I'm not talking about designated. I'm just talking about they're in the conservation district, but then we've got the commercial strip through there. So there is a little bit of a different standard that's applying to those guys, as opposed to the Hilltop or the Berry Hill Shopping Center, and the signs in those areas function differently. With the Malala being narrowed, it's not the Indy Speedway like it used to be, and it would seem to me that the signage should conform to the traffic mix, because people are not speeding up there at 45 miles unless it's at midnight. And so a lot of those signs that are really high in the air now, you're not going that fast. So 35, you should be able to see something at more of your I was thinking of the sign we approved for Pizza Hut. It's way up in the air. I don't think that's, with the change to Malala traffic, that sign may not be appropriate anymore, because it's not really where the driver is looking, wherever they're going. So in some ways, because different areas function differently, frontage is not really, it's a neutral thing, but it doesn't really work. Because I was thinking, okay, you've got Kanema. They've got a commercial district. They are going really fast there. But again, it's a historic commercial zone, so how would having the same signage requirements that they have in Berry Hill help them? I don't know if it does.
But they're still subject to historic review
Right,
board. So
okay,
they're,
right.
it's going to be a little bit
Right,
different for historic.
right.
So yeah, we had come up with the draft sign code for the community advisory team that had corridors and treating different areas differently. And the more we work through the code, the more that a lot of these sub-corridor areas started to look very, very similar based on frontage, because a lot of them, like along 7th, have smaller frontages, so
Well,
they by
and-
default had smaller signs.
The other side of it is we need to get something understandable out there, simple out there, let people get in compliance, and then look at whether or not somebody needs to be treated differently. I mean, you got to have a common core that everybody's starting from, and then if it turns out that 7th or Maine or whatever needs something, a little extra treatment or whatever, then you can go back and look at it. But right now, it's like you picked up a messed up bunch of cards off the floor, and you say, "I think we need more clubs," but you haven't even sorted the deck. So.
Well, it comes back again to the compliance enforcement issue, and I agree with Damon. Until you get everybody back in the box,
Back to zero.
and say, okay, now everybody's in compliance, you don't really have a clear picture of where this is taking you, because it's really possible that if you just enforce the code that we already have, that a lot of that clutter would go away.
Oh, I
So,
would,
you know,
I think 100% would go away.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
it would be
my
better.
perception is that probably 90% of the problem is with the lack of enforcement. And if that enforcement of the current code were in place, we'd find that the size of the problem isn't really as big as our perception would be, because it would kind of get back in the box.
I think this sounds like a great summer intern project where we get somebody.
Which
to-
part?
The part
Wait,
about
can we
coming
have
into
summer intern?
compliance. So
Compliance.
they go through every corridor and you compare what they have there with the record of whether they have a sign permit. You know, when was it legal, if it was, and then you kind of know. But I mean, that's, you know, that's the kind of, I don't mean to demean students, but that's the kind of work that I did as a summer intern, going through stuff like that and documenting stuff and saying, here you go, because
inventory.
yeah, we did inventory work and you learn
get
a
a
lot.
couple of graduate students in public policy, and they compare rules versus, compliance, and
And they
they
get
can write
extra
all
credit,
sorts
so you
of
don't have to pay them.
master's papers or whatever. That's what my ex-wife did.
Well, I would go back to what we talked about as far as speed. You know, a lot of people have complained about people driving too fast in their neighborhood, and it turns out that the biggest problem is not that the speed limit is wrong, it's just that people are exceeding the speed limit.
Mhm.
So
And they get
it's
away with it.
the same thing. I don't know where you are in your presentation, but I'd like to promote that we can try to wrap this up in the next half an hour if we could.
Why don't we, I think obviously we're going to need to come back.
Right.
I'd like to leave you with this idea in mind from my point of view. I'm not real enthusiastic about what we've done so far. It's
With the draft code or with the enforcement?
No, just the whole umbrella of the sign code. It's not, this isn't to say anything about you guys' work at the staff level, but I don't see a lot of enthusiasm for something that could be kind of a right turn at the intersection instead of going through it and just do the same old thing. A sign code's a sign code's a sign code. What I would like to see is an emphasis on enforcement. That's got to be. If we have no enforcement, we have nothing. We just got the dust behind us. And the other thing is, I'm going to be a strong advocate, from my point of view, of creating a design review board for signs. Because if you do that, you're going to get the attention of all these sign manufacturers in the Portland area that do business out here. Oregon City has now got a sign review board. And these people are spending big money on this advertising. And they deserve to get some sort of community reaction for the dollar that they spend. And you will see these sign companies come back with some enthusiastic designs that they are going to have to pass and review before the Planning Commission, if we choose to recommend that we act in that regard, or if the Commission decides to have a 5-member design review board. And I think the reaction to the community is going to see it's about time. It's about time, because what we're really looking at is how these signs are going to look. The size and all the and area and placement is going to take care of itself. But how they look is going to have to be a community decision based on people that are appointed to that review board. And I don't think it's just another red ink, red tape type of situation. I think it would really be beneficial to the community. I really do. And then you can get some enthusiasm for a brand new sign code.
This is a perfect spot if we want to relook at our proposed standards with a design review board to do that. So is that what we want?
Well, that's what I want.
I mean,
I can't
is
speak for the rest
there a
of the people.
consensus on? Because we have some other meetings scheduled, and if we want to look at that, I want to make sure that we postpone the other meeting so we have time to look at that in a thorough way, if that's something that the Planning Commission is interested in.
Well, I think that both Bob and Denise hit the nail on the head. You know, if we want to make a difference in the signage, you know, number one is enforcement. We've got to get things back in the box. But if we want to change the way things look, and so, you know, and I understand property owners and building, you know, tenants don't want to spend a huge amount of money on signage, but it would be nice if they would put more emphasis on the quality of the sign than the quantity of the sign.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more emphasis on good-looking signs, maybe smaller.
I think a design review committee is just more time and more red tape for somebody trying to build and improve their property. I think we do need to spend money, and that's the city council doing it, I know, but they just flat out need to set aside $100,000 for 5 years or whatever to have a sign czar who is out there walking the pavement with yellow slips the first year, giving it to businesses saying, you're not in compliance, be warned, in 20 whatever was decided, you will be fined and your sign removed, you know, boom, boom, you know, and doing that for a year or two, and then spending those next 3 years going through and making sure that the signs are removed, that they're carted away, and that the people are fined, and that's how you get it. And it sucks and makes that person the evil emperor, but you know, the first thing you do is spend that first couple years of just education. By the way, your sign is out of compliance. You can either A, go for a conditional use, a variance, because your sign's really only like 1.5 foot too big, and who really cares, or you need to have it trimmed, you need to lower it, you need to get rid of your 9x5 A-frame and have it be a 3, you know. But I think, you know, yeah, I have concerns that somebody's going to decide that their new business is toiletries and they call it Pooh Corner and they show a monkey with his hand behind his back, and that's the sign. But you know, hey, it's going to get my attention. But I knew that would get her going. But you know, I don't think. I mean, we don't even have an art committee. How can we have a sign design review committee if we're not even saying what things look? You know, I just think we're getting into trying to justify the art of the sign and not the basic structure. And a sign czar can do that. It doesn't take a committee.
I guess I'd just be a little concerned about just the sheer number.
Mm-hmm. That's why it would be a long-term.
I mean, in terms of the design review committee.
Yeah, that's why I don't want.
But I guess I hear where you're coming from in terms of the quality.
Yeah,
I think that's lacking in what's presented.
Yeah, I guess I would say that while in theory I like the idea of a design review group, but I don't think it's practical. I don't think that we have the capacity to do it. But I do think that knowing what we have on the ground is really important. So having that baseline of information, and let's get some minions, you know, some cute minions to do this so that we know what that is. But then it's all about education. It's about informing people, and you know, if we can somehow figure out, without taking more of your time, how to get people together saying, hey, we're going to have a meeting to talk about blah, 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 and here's what we'd like you to do. But I really think that we can't have it be open-ended. I think, as you said, if they're not in compliance now, they won't be in compliance under the new code, and it's not appropriate to have them stay up until the owner removes them. We're never going to get there. And I think, you know, I'm thinking long-term of, you know, what the Willamette Falls Legacy Project is going to mean to people coming to this community. And I don't want that to be the diamond in the rough over there and downtown, and then the rest of the town, you know, like people coming up here going, whoa, well, what happened? You know, this looks really good. Downtown looks really good. What happened to the rest of your community? Because, you know, but I also want to be sympathetic to small business owners and business owners in general. I get it. But knowing that I am not the average consumer, I have to try to put myself in the mind frame of the average consumer and say, okay, how does this look? You know, when I drive up Molalla Avenue, you know, is the point of that guy over there on the right-hand side with all his stuff trying to get me to go there? You know, I'm sure he is. It doesn't make me personally want to go there because I'm thinking, if you don't really care enough about the way your sign looks, does that translate into the way your business is to me? Well, maybe. You know, there might be some correlation. I'm torn between really cracking down on people, but I don't want to do that, knowing that we've had that 10-year amortization period and we didn't do anything about it. That's not the business owner's fault. We didn't have a elected governing body that was willing to take that heat. I think you're right about there's got to be some time frame. And I don't think it's 10 years, but I think it's less than that. And we've got to somehow help people get there, to get to this. And the ones that aren't in compliance, they do need to go away. They really do. I'm not sure how we get there to do that, but the paragraph in here about let's let them leave it up until they take it down, that's never going to happen.
Well, I appreciated what you said earlier about the junkification. You know, the image that we would like to see for Oregon City is one that, as people go through it, they have a good feeling about this community, and it's intangible. They may not even realize why it looks junky when they drive through, but I know
The mayor of Happy Valley a few years ago made the comment because that was his opinion of the place.
Of Oregon City?
Yeah.
He said it looked junky?
You don't remember that big event with Alice Norris and
We'll talk about it after, but yeah, okay.
But that's one of those intangible things. And I remember growing up in Southern California, there were a couple places there that you didn't have to see the sign of the city limits. As soon as you crossed a certain street, you knew you were in that city.
Yeah, you see it in LA all the time.
They look junky.
Switching between the different communities.
Well, as I was saying, Santa Barbara. That's one of those places. It's like
and Santa Barbara,
Carmel. I mean, I know again those are a little upscale, but again, there's an image that they've projected.
So somehow, what you want to do within your sign code is encourage anti-junkification of the city.
That's right.
It encourages compliance because it looks better.
Yeah.
People remember something that looks really good more than they remember, it's just like they say, if you've had a bad experience with X, Y, or Z, you will tell everybody.
Well, and we want people to remember Oregon City in a good way.
Yes.
Not that they go home and they go, wow, that is a trashy looking place.
Well, and you got to wonder how many people have non-compliant signs because they're trying to be seen around the other guy's non-compliant sign.
That's one of the problems with Molalla Avenue.
That's exactly right.
Are there any standards that you could think of that we should add to our sign code so we don't have a lot of, say, material standards for commercial zoning designations just for residential? Is there anything you could think of?
Well, is there
that
any
you
requirement or
believe we should
minimum
add?
for flagpoles and flags in a commercial area? Can we have every person on Main Street with a Lattice Motors flag flying?
Jonathan would have to kill them first. So.
Well,
Good.
7th, Molalla,
Yeah.
So we'll come up with height requirements for flags.
flags and, yeah.
But I think the larger question is that there are concerns that what's proposed isn't addressing the
Aesthetic.
yes.
Is there more criteria that we can have? So it sounds like we're not interested in the design review board. Is that?
Well, I mean, I guess we can do the. I mean, I can tell you how many. We can come back and tell you how many sign permits we've done historically per year. I mean, it's difficult, right, to run up every sign permit to a design review committee.
Yeah.
Well, and that may not
so, I mean,
be
is
the
there
answer.
another right? So, is there another way to get? So, what I'm hearing
that's
is
the
that
question.
there's concern. I mean, that kind of rolling over existing size and isn't addressing the problem.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. So I know there's a new sign that just went up on the corner of John Adams and 7th. Do they have a permit for that? It's made primarily of natural materials.
I have no idea.
Well, see,
But we
again,
can-
I mean,
we can find out for you.
are people even coming in and getting them? Do they even know that they have to get a sign permit? I'm sure they probably do downtown because you probably tell them they need to do that. But, elsewhere, do they know they need to come in for?
It's like Dairy Queen
A permit?
changed their sign
Yeah,
twice.
yeah.
And it's the structure itself that's changed, the cap on top of the pole.
Yeah, they got a sign permit.
So,
Yeah, the hard thing is to establish a criteria that gives enough flexibility that anybody can design a sign that is within the criteria, and you're not limiting it to every sign has to look exactly the same and has to be the same size and shape, but on the other hand, not allowing the junkification of things. And you talk about different materials. You can have metal signs that are nice and crisp and sharp, and then you can have some that are free
the old
flowing.
porcelain signs are beautiful.
Well, you can have some like what Damon was joking about, the shape of a knife or shape of something that reflects what the business has, and I think that's great. If you like a bicycle shop, you've got a bicycle as part of your sign. I think that's creative if it's done well. If it doesn't look junky, and that's the hard
You're talking
part.
about the ones where they take the 4x8 piece of plywood and they spray paint on that side.
and that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Is how do you distinguish between the one that looks classy and the one that looks tacky? It's hard to codify that.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's a little handbook that the city of Portland had. It talks about what you need to do to start a business, and one of the two things after making sure you got your business license, they talked about, don't scrimp on your sign, because that's the first thing people see. It's like you only have, what's that saying? You only have 5 minutes to make a first impression.
Right.
So most business owners are so busy getting their business started that that's the last thing they think about, and then they have no money, and then you get the spray painted one or whatever. But if it's the first thing after their business license that they think about, there's more thought gone into it because that's what people are going to see. It was like that one that you showed that was Lincoln. I actually haven't been there, but I remember seeing that.
online.
And it's very simple. It's obviously they were trying to project something, certain image, and there it is. And I was just thinking too of downtown, the one that comes to mind is Mi Familia. It's very simple, very basic, conveys the message, but it's not, going over the head.
That's because their advertising is a smell.
Mel, yes. And they've got an advantage there. You walk by and you think, I want pizza.
So, in general, I think it looks like, from what we've seen so far, things are going the right way. I don't think we want a design review committee yet. Maybe at the 5 or 10 year review of this, when everybody's closer to compliance, maybe not completely, then, and possibly at that point, there might be the political will to say, we're going to set up a sign grants group who, just like the urban renewal grants for improvements. We want to finish this last little bit. We want Molalla to look a certain way. So we're going to put out, X amount of money, and here's this group of 5 people who are a review committee and a grant committee. That's in the future. Right now, we just got to get to 0 before we can start doing 1 and 2 and 3.
Yeah, I think you got to get people back in the box, and so the enforcement is important. And at the other end of the scale, what we talked about is, having some criteria that you can establish that says if the sign has deteriorated from its original condition, it needs to be either repaired or replaced.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, because there's several metal signs that are in desperate need of being repainted. There's several city flagpoles that are in desperate need of being repainted.
Oh, you mean when you can start seeing the rust on them?
One thing you could do, Laura, is say that the sign shall be maintained to the standard of its original application when a sign permit was issued.
That's what Charles was trying to get at.
The key word there is maintained to its original standard.
And then a plan to move people who are out of conformance back into compliance.
Right.
With carrots as opposed to sticks.
Well, now you're getting right back into enforcement, which I think is the superstructure of your old sign.
Well, then you get a
I understand on the sign review that can really be a hard nut to crack, and I'm not suggesting that my position is based on that, but certainly you're going to have enforcement. You've got to have enforcement through the administration of it, and that's going to be a budgetary item. It really is, and we've already passed a budget for what, Tony, 2 years.
Yeah.
So just getting that factor approved by the commission is 2 years away.
Well, no, it's only a year away because we're in the first of the 2 years.
2 years,
So this
yeah.
is the perfect time to have the discussion because we get it approved, and next May is when they're going to be talking budget. So if they're going to add a position of signs or put $100,000 in for intern time and space and shoe leather, then that's the time. But
Well, maybe there's a sliding scale. So you come into compliance now, you pay a little bit. The longer it takes you to come into compliance, the more it costs you.
yeah.
So you have 2 years or 18 months to remove your non-conforming signs.
Yeah, fees are a hard one. We heard a lot of suggestions that we should charge fees for violations, but how our code is set up, only the municipal judge can charge a
Charge it.
fee. And usually someone will remove their non-conforming sign before they get to court, so it never even reaches the point. So we've never charged a fee for violation of the sign code that we are aware of.
So, Jonathan, I have a question for you.
Which means you have to come up here. Uh-huh. It's all a plot to make you walk.
So, because you have a smaller, more cohesive group, so I know just a little bit. So, there's the Main Street group downtown, and they all kind of have a common goal about what generally, let's just say not everybody agrees 100%, but there's a general goal, there's a general concept of getting to the Main Street where everybody kind of said, we all need to get on this bus and do certain things to help promote us and make us all look good. So, just from your experience, do you think that we're kind of barking up the wrong tree in terms of trying to suggest that there's a way that we could talk with business owners as a city to say, it's all to our benefit that everybody's, all the signs are in compliance and everybody looks, good, whatever that is. We don't look the way people outside of our community are saying that we look. Is that just ridiculous? Or, we're trying to get across that signage is important, maintaining signage is important, and our community is important. So there is going to have to be some carrot and sticks in this thing.
Well, a couple things. Just in terms of the quality of signage, that I think over time, just thinking in terms of the way the market works and the one holdout business that has the last of the non-conforming signs and that's rusted and falling apart and whatever, I would tend to think that maybe they would be, if that's the type of business that they're promoting and the district doesn't necessarily support that anymore, then maybe the market takes care of that, and that but in terms of, to speak to a lot of the signage that you're saying that you appreciate downtown. My understanding is that a lot of that was promoted through sign grants, and so either through
The carrot.
right, and so that much of the other signage is what. So if I look down the street and every sign that I've personally seen that I said, oh, that's a nice sign, that's a nice sign, that's a nice sign, virtually all of them have been incentivized through sign grants, and it sounds like that there's not a lot of ability in the code to do that specifically.
I don't think it was sign grants. I think it was storefront improvement grants, and that was part of their.
But
storefront
yeah,
improvement.
it was part of a
It was-
grant. Yeah, it was
So,
part of a grant.
in order to get the money to be able to spend on your sign, then whoever the granting body is has the ability to say, well, this is how we want you to spend your money if you're going to take our money.
Right.
But, and so, I'm not really sure how to answer your question, though.
Well, I think you did. It's the carrot part. I mean,
Well,
part of
and-
it's going to have to be a carrot.
Well, and some of the carrot is just that is peer pressure, right? That eventually, if 4 of your neighbors are putting on a better image, you would hope that that would sort of influence the holdout to say, let's, work together on this. And
Yeah, the rising tide that lifts all boats also points out which ones are sinking.
Yeah. If I wish there was something like a Molalla Avenue Merchants Association, but there isn't. We've got the chamber, but I don't know how many people on Molalla Avenue are really chamber members.
We had Main Street and the Chamber sit on our community advisory
Mhm.
team, and they did commit to helping disperse information and get the word out there when we do our sign code update, and to help with that educational component. And we're suggesting, easy to read pamphlets, so it is easy to get that information out there for people to disperse as well.
Another idea might be some of the areas that have, I'm just thinking of our neighborhood association, we have a commercial core, that maybe we can work that through the neighborhood association, inviting all the business owners in this area come in, and we're going to just talk about sign code. It wouldn't necessarily be a neighborhood meeting, but they're part of our neighborhood.
Right.
But there might be a way to, South End probably, they only have the one couple of businesses, so that wouldn't necessarily work, but maybe Berkeley Hills or Hillendale, where there are some of these businesses, and then the conditional use, like the churches, because I think a lot of them need some education.
So we're hoping to use our networks as best
Right.
we can to disperse that information, and then that can help create peer pressure to have a conforming sign, or sort of address issues before it reaches code enforcement as well.
Thank you.
We've discussed sort of initially about, is there a design view that Main Street has or something, and ultimately, if there is one specifically, that obviously the most preferred choice is through consensus of downtown to act together. That a ordinance would be the sort of last resort if those sorts of efforts didn't pan out. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
So can we maybe wrap things up for this evening?
Yes. Do you want me to talk really fast and be done in 20 minutes, or half an hour? Or do you want to come back
No,
with another
it's
work
getting
session?
late.
You email
And I
those
think
to
that
us?
there's some.
Yeah.
I guess I'm struggling a little bit with what I'm bringing back to you.
It's obviously not a design review board.
But I mean, are we moving in the right direction, or is there a feeling that we're not moving in the right? It sounds like we're missing some of this design.
Well, yeah, I don't
Element
think,
to
I don't
this.
think, my sense is we're not being critical of what you've brought to us. I think we would just like to see a little bit more.
Yeah,
You know,
a little
in terms of
clarity on some issues.
enforcement, the issue of, bringing things into conformity. If there's a little bit better way that we can encourage building owners and tenants to bring in a design that we can use as a standard for maintenance in the future, those type of
I
things?
don't think that's part of this, though. I think that's part of the city commission's discussion. I mean, we can say, this is all really good, we like it, we support it, but it doesn't mean crap without a cop. And
But we can identify that there is a maintenance requirement as part of the code, and then it goes.
right, and we've had, I think that's part of her notes.
And
So
you
then-
want to just get something down about
Then the
limiting the
commission-
size of flags,
Yeah, and then the
talk about
commission
bringing
is
the
gonna-
height down.
The
a
city
little bit.
commission's going to have to put the teeth in this.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying, is I don't think Tony needs to spend his effort on talking about enforcement to us. It just needs to almost be just a statement from us and from him that code enforcement is paper tiger unless, there's.
Done.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first one to acknowledge enforcement is a big part of this, along with education
Yeah,
and getting the word out.
education.
Right.
Making sure that when somebody comes in and applies for a building permit or a business license, that somehow this information about, because I think Commissioner Mahoney was right. I mean, most of the code we write is for the 5%, right? But I think that when we talk about what do we want to see, what is the value that we want to portray, without some type of a material or a consensus about what that is it more pedestrian-oriented sign? I mean, we talked a little bit how the functionality of 7th and Malala has changed. I mean, are we moving towards revisiting this corridor idea, or is it one size fits all? Because that's kind of what we have right now. It's kind of the one size fit all, except for certain circumstances. If you're in a historic conservation district, historic district. I guess that I was kind of hearing that, I think, but I'm not sure if that's where you want us to go.
I am. I mean, I think we need to get everything to baseline, then vary the baseline after we're at baseline. I mean,
So until we have an understanding of what isn't meeting the existing code, we can't move forward with the new code?
no,
Or-
I'm
okay.
saying that the idea of having special corridors with special requirements or special signs other than the conservation districts, which already exist, that, I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can have a special Main Street sign corridor or a special 7th or Molalla or Hilltop sign zone until we get everybody back to zero.
Okay, so just continue to kind of work under the model we have now.
Right.
Yeah, and see, and I just disagree with you
Okay.
enough slightly, because I think we can't. I think because of the change of our traffic control in those particular corridors, it's different. Something different is happening there. And although we don't have a 7th Street Corridor Business Association, there's no reason why we couldn't have one. I mean, that's something that's outside of this purview. But I think the city spent a ton of money to make that area look like something. It seems to me that the signing in that corridor needs to match that.
Yeah, but we're talking about
We're
writing
talking-
special sign language for 15 businesses out of the entire city.
No, but they function differently. So why should the standard for the Hilltop be exactly the same as Molalla Ave? I mean, as 7th. It isn't the same place. I don't see a lot of people there having freestanding signs because
Where?
there's not there's a few. Dairy Queen, Mike's. Who knows if Mike's going to have a freestanding sign in their new building? I don't know. There may be no place to put it, but it seems to me.
There's Levi's for sale, there's Tattoo
Well,
Parlor, there's a dozen little
Well,
signs that pop
Mr.
up.
Levi's for sale
I'm just saying.
he's not legal.
I'm
but-
just saying, I think writing language for special corridors right now isn't necessary until we can get things back at least to 80-90% compliance. And if it turns out that Molalla Avenue between grocery outlet and I don't know, Green Grocer, which is the same place, but I don't care. Keeps
Beaver Creek Road.
keeps coming to the planning commission for variances to their signs because they think they're special, then we need to sit down and go, they don't feel that they can comply because they're special circumstances. Let's look at whether or not there's a corridor to be created here.
Okay, well,
But if they can comply.
I'll grant you that. I guess I agree with you to the extent that, yes, I think we have to get the baseline. We need to get everybody that we can, and if we can do it on a corridor basis and then look at something, again,
Yeah,
it's just,
and I frankly wouldn't mind having
Denise,
different signs because it differentiates the
You
state.
bring up a good
from
point.
Here to here.
We could have a sign action corridor or a sign action area where we concentrate on Mole Avenue and we make an effort to bring those people into compliance. And they do function right, differently. Different than downtown? Yes, because they're going 35 miles an hour. Everybody gets to these businesses via car, and they all get at a different speed. And downtown, it's a lot of pedestrian stuff.
Yeah,
But
so-
I look at it from the standpoint of not just the property owner, but what is the sign for? It's to attract the person that's looking for something, you see. And so it's a function on both sides of the aisle here. And I agree with what Damon said. We got to bring these people that are out of compliance back into compliance. So there's a two-edged sword here, I think.
well, I think I think in the long term, it benefits everybody because it gets back to that whole aesthetic thing, you know.
It contributes to the image by taking away a lot of the clutter.
Mhm.
So
I think we need to beef up section 1528-120. I think we need to take another look at that, which is dealing with the non-conforming signs. And from what I'm hearing from everybody is that we need to get people more in line with what the code is or what it's going to be.
It's something we could do.
I would suggest that when we send this to the city council,
That we all need to show up.
well, one of the things that we do is we send a recommendation specifically about the conformance and the enforcement part of this thing is that it's not just, here's another code to put on the books, but this needs to have some action to make it work.
So we want
We
to
need
put
to carrot instead.
we want some teeth behind it this time as opposed to just, okay,
And maybe what you're suggesting, they come up with a system of, there's a fine if you're not in compliance in the next 5 years, but there's a reward if you bring your sign in compliance sooner.
yeah. See, I guess I'd be diametrically opposed to 5 more years because we've had,
Right.
what is
I'm
from,
just
what was
saying
it, from 1993 to 2014? That's their amortization period, whether you're a new business or you've been here for forever. It's
Maybe they have that balance between the penalty and the reward for getting into compliance.
We issue an occupancy permit on any building that we issue a building permit on. Why can't we issue a compliance permit on any sign that we issue a sign permit on? You're in compliance with the, that could just be a correspondence. It doesn't have to be on.
I would hope that all the permits that have been issued for signs.
Yeah.
Well,
So I guess the question is, can we look at, is there some type of a trigger, like, if we have a non-conforming code that says, if you've got a building, we want you to focus on interior parking lot landscaping
Sure.
or bicycle parking, I guess if we can look at if there's some way associated with X investment, that the sign gets reviewed. I mean, I don't know. We can look at that.
We'll look at it. So just to clarify with the non-conforming, so the proposed code says if it was constructed legally, you can keep it. If it wasn't constructed legally, you can't keep it. Do we like that standard, or does it sound like we want to change that standard?
No, I think that's the
I'm okay
standard.
with
How
it, but
we don't
We just
put-
want to do incentives, even if it was constructed legally. Here's some incentives
Well,
to.
you have to bring it into compliance within 90 days, or 120, or 6 months, or something.
But ours right now, the proposed code just says if it was constructed legally, it can stay forever. We're okay
Right.
with that, or do we
Yes.
want to do an amortization? Okay. I just want to clarify that.
so what is it,
It was
what if
built
it was
with a
not
goal.
constructed legally?
If it wasn't legal, it's still not legal.
Right.
Then how do we get it fixed?
That's the other part
It
of
was
the
already-
equation. But she's just asking, is that language good? And I think that language is good. How they go from illegal to legal, that's the rest of the discussion that we haven't really
Well, that's
had.
up to
Yeah.
the.
So
that's
how
up
do
to
we
the
know
sign
that they
owner.
were constructed legally?
It's the onus is on them to prove it.
If they have a permit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if there was
And
no
how do we know
permit.
they have a permit? Do we know that they have a permit?
We should.
We have boxes of permits, but the onus is on them to, before, someone would say, oh, I think we built that around 1995, so we'd go look at all the permits from 1995 and see if we found it. We have a memo that's maybe 80% written that addresses all of these issues like enforcement and how we go from non-conforming to conforming. So that'll come before you April 14th, which is the first scheduled planning commission hearing for the sign code. So that date was picked because we had to send out a Measure 56 notice and a DLCD notice, so everyone got those green cards in the mail that said April 14th.
Mine's on the fridge.
On the fridge. Ooh, that's good. So it sounds like we'll need at the April 14th hearing, we'll sort of do a continuance, and then maybe we could use that time to finish off this work session.
I don't want Charles to
instead.
miss one iota of this discussion here. He's
And
not going to be here on
I
the
won't
14th.
be here on the 14th.
So,
Neither will I.
Well, I don't think we're going to get through this in one work session.
So we'll continue the work session part of going through what our proposed code is, and if you have anything you want us to tweak or change, we can do that. So at that time, I expect that we'll have some new code language for you regarding maintenance and some of the other issues that you identified, flag size as well.
Do you fall
Hi,
asleep
he
at your
said-
desk when you're looking at this thing? I mean,
I actually,
this is
it's
so
really
exciting, I can't
interesting.
believe
We've
it.
did you, Bob, when you were
I
doing
did
it?
indeed,
You
yeah.
fell
We've
asleep?
had over
Okay.
19 meetings with the community. I mean, and then 4 community advisory team meetings. I mean, people
My
are really
eyes would-
excited. People
my eyes
get-
would start.
I think Damon also talked about the height of the flag
Pole.
poles.
Yeah, yeah. And then
But in that flag size thing, that's
Uh-huh.
in relation to a freestanding pole. Because, if you've got, a flag on the, just a pole on the side of your building, you may end up with a 6-foot flag, but only a 5-foot pole. So, I mean, like mine, on the
Or
side
a
of my
4-foot
house
check.
is big. So it's just in relation to a freestanding pole.
So I guess the other thing that I did hear, I guess two things. One is, the last time we did this 10-year amortization, I mean, it's
Pie in the sky.
very difficult to do.
Right.
So I guess trying to think of a way to do that thoughtfully and something that can actually be implemented, I think will be one thing we're going to sit here and try and brainstorm and bring something back to you. I mean, I understand the concern and I understand the desire, and I wish I could go out there tomorrow and
You take a
ding everybody
You
and
take a
say,
stake bed truck and drive around town
With a megaphone and a A-frame sign on the
throw
back.
all the non-conforming
There you
signs
go.
in the back and haul them down to Metro.
so we can post to the city commission like maybe a reduced fee
Yeah,
if you're
that's
removing a
right.
non-conforming sign for a new sign or something like that.
Yeah.
but
And
I
frankly,
guess
I think we're talking about like a 4-year, kind of maximum, because one of the things that Denise said is, 10 years was so far out. Well, the other element of it being 10 years out is nobody sitting on city council is going to still be there. At 4 years, you're going to be up for re-election at the point in time when you're cutting people's signs down. So maybe you need to, be willing to put up or shut up because, what have you done? You passed this law and now you're not enforcing it. How dare you,
Well,
or
Well,
you passed
I
this
think that's why I
draconian
think
law,
it's
how dare you
trying to be
enforce it?
thoughtful about what's the actual hook to force the sign change, rather than just go knock on a door and say, "You got 90 days."
Yeah.
That's
well,
hard.
I think it's
Yeah,
got to be
90
some
is
sort of
not
some
reasonable.
sort of mailing to get the chamber to help whoever to all the businesses saying, we are checking with you to see, by the way, we have this code. We're checking with you to see whether you have documentation, nicely about your sign. We have some records at the city, but come on down, or however we do it, or we have the open sign court or whatever we're calling it. Because 21-year amortization period is ridiculous, and I just did the math. That's where we are right now, and if we don't do something in the next 2.5 to 3 years, we can just forget all this work is for naught.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we'll come back with a work session on.
And I know businesses are going to say, well, I haven't been here for 21 years. I just put my sign. Well,
You put the wrong sign up.
you didn't come down and check.
But if we're saying, but we do have agreement, if it was constructed with a permit legally,
Yep.
even if it
Right.
doesn't meet the new code.
Right.
No,
It
that's,
can
that's the
continue on.
grandfather clause.
Yeah,
I
I'm
have
all-
no problem with that.
I'm all about people being legal.
And then did you want more? I mean, we talked about, we kept going back to the look. I mean, really the only way you get there,
It's design review.
or, or building, is, really really becoming very prescriptive. I mean, it takes away it's hard to say I want this type of a look and not be extremely
Well,
prescriptive, which gets away from some of the creativity.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that's
don't-
the hard balancing act.
I don't see us being prescriptive. I think somehow or other, if there was a way to just, and I don't know how to do this other than a design review, is what Denise was saying, that junkification. Because there are really good-looking metal signs and there are really lousy-looking metal signs. So you can't just say it
And
has to
flip
be
signs.
a particular material.
Were all
And-
those signs that were provided to us courtesy of security, were those all done by security?
I assume so. It was an excerpt from a PowerPoint that she submitted during our community advisory team, and so she did a good job of showing just the square footage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to just pick on them, but, my experience with them is that they do produce very high-quality work. I mean, we used them a lot in our storefront program. So, I mean, I know what they're, capable of. But although I've seen lots of other folks do sign, John Forresloff did that big giant one that we had that says Oregon City, and I remember that going through the design process, and that's a terrific looking sign. But the city was very prescriptive about what they wanted, and that went out. And there's a lot of people that do wooden carved signs that are out there that are, I mean, they're beautiful, they're works of art.
Yeah.
But then, you get the ones that are.
I guess I just have
Yeah,
a feeling that when
yeah.
you talk about some of these jurisdictions, whether it be San Jose or Carmel, or I have a feeling if we went and pulled those code, it's very prescriptive.
Well, I can tell you Carmel's is for sure.
Me.
Santa Barbara's is because they have a specific Spanish look. We don't have a Spanish look. San Jose does not have a look.
But they probably essentially capped. They probably put a pretty restrictive height limit and size limit.
They did.
So
yeah.
is that something you want us to research and look into? I mean, because I'm having a hard time meeting one of,
guess
I think,
my-
your main concerns.
Well, my question might be, since you said that they've changed fairly dramatically, is find out how they changed dramatically. Did they do it with 5 code enforcement people going crazy for 3 years, or did they say, look, here's a tax incentive, here's a
How they
grant
got there.
program, here's a, here's both.
Yeah, how did they implement it?
Well-
Because it sounds like it's relatively successful, so,
There's a fairly easy way, unless there's a big fee to it, is that, are we still allowed to make phone calls to the League of Oregon Cities to find out who may have changed their sign code within the last 5 years and how they got there?
We
I mean,
have done a bunch of that already.
because that's the
and
type
we've
of
already-
minion work I used to do.
We've called a bunch of jurisdictions up
Jurisdictions.
and down the West Coast.
But yeah,
and
they
outside
would do
Oregon.
it. They would package it for you. That's when I was an intern there. That's the type of work we had to do. They'd say, so and so called up, wants to know about this code, and then we'd go research. We'd do all the phone calling, and
I want to intern for that. I had to do
it was
that.
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
So yes,
But I know the reason I was asking about Paul is I know that Lake Oswego changed their code, and and there was a little bit controversial. But again, you drive through Lake Oswego, and there is a certain who made the comment. Was it you, Charles, about the look?
Yeah, continuity.
There's an image that they are trying to
Image.
project as a
Yeah.
community, but not constrain. So the downtown has a look. I know if you get out on even Cruise Way, I was out there recently. There's a certain kind of look out that way too. I mean, they're next door, and there's no reason why. I don't know what West Lynn has done with their sign code.
Milwaukee was looking at some slight standards of Portland, and there's a couple around here.
Yeah, I
up
wouldn't
in
totally use
Washington.
Portland. You know, as much as I love Portland, it's hit and miss here.
So it sounds like our size requirements are okay, but maybe something with material standards we want to look at more.
Well, see,
Or-
that's where I don't think you can really go to material standards.
Just
because-
maintenance standards.
Yeah, the materials, see, I've seen some really great looking wood signs.
Right.
And Denise was talking about, you can have some carved signs or sandblasted
Laser
signs.
cut signs,
And
yeah.
they look wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But just because it's made out of wood doesn't make it a good looking sign. So that's the hard part, is how do you establish a criteria that allows people to use any material that they want to use, but it ends up looking good instead of tacky.
Well, you got porcelain signs that are 50 years old that look just as beautiful as the day they were born, but they're metal and porcelain. Oh, there's nothing natural about porcelain. So,
You can have glass signs.
yeah,
and-
neon. There's some nice neon signs.
There's a lot of ways. So I don't think it's establishing particular materials. It's just kind of more of an approach to how you design the sign to make it a quality sign.
How, just as a quick question, it's not for tonight, but how are we dealing with awnings and signs on awnings? Are those considered a projecting sign? Are they a wall sign, or?
We clarified in the newest code that if they're attached to structures such as awnings, that it would be considered a wall sign.
Wall sign, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll look at some of these. It sounds like there's no big red flag in any
So
of these
far.
standards.
There's a
whether
little-
we've gone through them or not.
There's a
but-
little red flag for me because I think there's too many. We got wall signs, we got freestanding signs, we got A-frame signs, we got it's too much to me. I don't know if we need all that.
Yeah.
But that's what the
What-
technology's producing.
One thing I like about our code, the proposed code, as opposed to our existing code, is right now we exempt signs under 2 square feet, so you could have as many as you want. That's why you'll see the ancillary signs are new, because we tried to limit the clutter or the tiny little signs or the things where there was an unlimited amount of numbers.
That's good.
So hopefully it should be less cluttery than you can be today. So it sounds like we're headed in the right direction with this code. We'll come back and tell you more about it in another work session. If there's anything you can think of any requirements, send me an email as we work on this.
Well, in terms of the aesthetics of a sign, I think Charles brings up a good point in terms of maintenance. Just keep the maintenance of a sign up to its original condition when the sign permit was issued. And that'll go a long ways in eliminating a tacky-looking sign 10 years down the road. And, that would be on the sign permit, maintenance, a little paragraph. You're encouraged to, or the Oregon City Sign Code requires that you maintain your sign to its original standard.
Yeah, the only thing is we'd hope that the original standard was good, that they didn't use like recycled plastic or it was,
Which is now faded and turned into.
So
Yeah, but
I'll
if they
look
use
into that and get back
plastic.
to you on how we can tighten that up.
There's got to be a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, okay, so that's all I have. And then I saw in the audience as well, we have Sandy Burley, who was on our community advisory team. And I assume she wanted to speak tonight as well? Oh, no. Oh.
Just wanted to make
We
sure
want
we
to
didn't
thank
get
all of
rid
our
of
committee
billboards.
members. They did a lot of-
Yes.
Oh, that'll be another fun discussion, I'm sure.
Well, they did a lot of work.
There is a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of meetings that went into this. We do feel good that it has been to a lot of different eyes for people to check and double check and recheck things. On the 14th, which is that next planning commission hearing where we're looking at the sign code, we are inviting our community advisory team back to give them letters of appreciation, because I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of pages we sent them that they read before and after all of these meetings and emails. So they did put a lot of time into it. And so there will be a short presentation part with, before our sign code work session next time.
You might keep in mind what Denise said regarding the Blue Heron, because all we're doing here, you know, tonight and into the future will ultimately affect the Blue Heron.
Yes.
We definitely want to have some special standards for them.
Well, you'd think so, you know, you really would.
Tony, do you have any?
So what do we have on
communications
deck for the
us?
14th?
2 zone changes and the sign code
Yeah.
on the 14th.
Yeah, we're not sure if those zone changes will.
Are these new? Or
The,
You'll
the
get-
zone changes that were set aside because of sewer, right?
Yes. Both the White Lane
Both-
and
Both of them were
Woodlawn.
set, we set both of them aside for that issue?
One of them was set aside because they wanted to come
Right,
back,
come back,
with
right.
an R8 rather than R10,
Right.
the second one.
Right.
So they're coming back with that. And then the Woodlawn one was for the sewer.
That was Team Challenge?
No,
No.
Woodlawn, the
No, these were
Woodlawn.
the zone changes.
where the big oak trees
Woodlawn
were
was
and all
right
that.
by it, Yeah. Yeah, so we've been working with Public Works, and they have Brown and Caldwell running quite a bit. They did a lot of the sanitary sewer master plan baseline work, and so we're trying to refine some of the areas where we have capacity issues so that we have a better understanding of where they impact and where they don't
Gonna
throughout
get
the
off,
city.
we're gonna get off good there. So you're gone and Charles is gone, okay.
That's all that I have for tonight.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.